Live streaming up and running.
Madam Chair, we are live and on YouTube and we are recording.
Great, thank you very much. So welcome everybody. Before we begin, just to remind you that, as the clerk has said, the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Township's YouTube channel. And we do have participants joining us via Zoom at various points throughout the meeting and from the council chambers. So folks, please raise your hands and I will call on you. So we'll now call the roll. Please state your presence when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Present.
Councillor Watt.
Present.
Councillor Vervoort.
Present.
Councillor Johnston.
Present.
Myself, Heather Watson. And on the staff side, we have our clerk, Martina Chait-Hartwig.
Hello.
CAO, Alana Arthurs. Interim Treasurer, Paul Kremers. Manager of Public Works, Jake Condon. I'm trying to get every titles and names correctly. Our planner, Christina Coulter. Recreation Manager, Pedersen, and acting chief building official, Don Hellivan. Hello and welcome. So with quorum of council in attendance, I call the meeting to order. I will now read the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Michi-Sagaig Initiative. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. And I will now call for a moment of silence, please. Okay. Moving along our agenda, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing heads shaking, we'll take that as a no. And could I please get an adoption of this evening's agenda? Councillor Stewart, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson. All in favor? And that carries. And we have two sets of minutes before us, council meeting minutes from December 20th and from January 17th. Could I please get a motion to receive and approve? Councillor Vervoort, Councillor Johnston, all in favor, and those carried. On our consent agenda, today we have 4 items. 7.1 is an MPAC Municipal Partnership Report. 7.2, notice of public meeting from the Township of Selwyn. 7.3, municipal appraisal forms from land division, severance files, and waste management quarterly garbage report 7.4. Does anyone want to hold back any of those items? Nope. Then can we get one motion to receive those? Councillor Watt, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to delegations, petitions, presentations, or public meetings. We do have a public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment application, file R0522, Bolton. We have somebody in the waiting room on Zoom.
Yes.
So could I please get a motion to open the public meeting? Councillor Johnson, Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor? And that also carries. So I will turn it over to Ms. Coulter. Christina, on to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Watson, members of council, and the public. This is the public meeting for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment, file number R-05-22, and council has before them report planning 2023-07. So the owner, Gary Bolton, has applied to amend the existing zoning on portions of the property located at 4131 County Road 32. Martina, I'm not sure if Mr. Bolton is present online.
Yes,
he is.
Mr. Bolton is here.
Perfect. So a notice of the public meeting and complete application was given on December 23rd, 2022 by first-class prepaid mail and email as prescribed under the regulations of the Ontario Planning Act. Notice was posted on the Township website. However, due to the weather and delays with Canada Post, A notice was not able to be posted on the subject property in time to comply with the regulations. Therefore, a revised notice was given to the prescribed persons and public bodies on January 10th, and the notice was posted on the subject property. The property is currently zoned the rural zone, the development zone, and the environmental conservation zone, as well as the special district 43 zone. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the severed parcels, those are Lot A and Lot B, from the rural zone to the special district 255 zone to address a lack of frontage. So these parcels front on the Rotary Greenway Trail, not actually on County Road 32. The zoning bylaw amendment will also rezone the retained parcel from the rural zone to the special district 256 zone to address a reduced lot area and to address a lack of frontage already existing on the retained parcel. Portions of the retained will also be rezoned from the rural zone to the environmental conservation zone to recognize the wetland and 30-meter buffer. And finally, the special district 43 zone on the retained parcel is proposed to be amended to accurately reflect the location based on the survey prepared by J.B. Flugel dated January 28, 2005, and to recognize the existing buildings and structures and their setbacks. There are no changes proposed to the existing development D2 zone or the environmental conservation zone already on the retained plans. So a copy of the draft bylaw is attached to the report. The attached draft bylaw does vary slightly from the bylaw that was posted on the notice of public meeting on the Township website. The owner had requested that the rear lot lines for the severed parcels be straight rather than irregular. So initially the rear lot lines of the severed parcels were following the 30-meter buffer exactly. The property owner preferred to have a straight rear line, so the lot lines for the lots were actually reduced in size, and the environmental conservation zone was expanded to allow for a straight rear lot line. So in reviewing the application, it appears to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, conform with the road plan and the official plan. The following comments were received. Bell had no concerns. Enbridge Gas had no objections to the application. Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board had no concerns or issues related to their mandate. And Autonomy Region Conservation Authority indicated that the application is consistent with provincial policy statement sections 3.1, 2.1, and 2.2. And that it conforms to the growth plan sections 4.2.3 and 4.2.4. The site is regulated by ORCA and permits from their agency will be required prior to any construction, site alteration, or further development. The subject property is located within a vulnerable area for a municipal drinking water source, and a notice under the Clean Water Act has been received and is attached to the report. At the time of writing of the report, there were no comments received from any members of the public. Hiawatha First Nation did request clarification on the purpose of the zoning bylaw, and a copy of the draft bylaw was provided. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Madam Mayor, for any questions.
Thank you very much for that. So this is where it gets tricky because we may have people on Zoom and in the room. Is there anybody present who would like to speak or comment on the application either for or against the application? I'll ask again. Oh.
Can I ask a question? Sure. On the paper, I don't see entrances for the sentences. Do they appear somewhere?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So through the severance application, the entrances have been identified by the County of Peterborough. It will be a mutual entrance serving both, and they will require an easement across the Rotary Trail to access the proposed severed parcels.
And will they be needing culverts across there?
The entrance will be installed as per the County of Peterborough requirements.
Okay.
Are there any other people, or is there anybody present who wants to speak in favor or against the application? And I'll ask a third time.
I can maybe help Ray Johnson. This is Gary Bolton. So in consultation with Dan, and I'm not so sure I would pronounce his last name correctly, so I'll just skip over that. But in consultation with the engineer from the county of Peterborough, when I got the initial approval for the location for the driveway, which is on the survey, he indicated that no culverts would be required. It's a level flat area and it drains away from where the entrance area is, if that helps.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Johnson, does that help? Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments for or against? Seeing none from the public, any other questions from council? Seeing nothing. Mr. Bolt, we have you on the line. I don't know if there are any other agents or staff on. We're good. So could we get a motion to close the public meeting, please? Councillor Watt, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor? And that carries. So we could, if we could please, council, get a motion to receive Christina's report.
I make a motion to receive.
And are you moving the recommendation in its entirety?
In its entirety.
That's in the report?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson? Thank you. All in favor? And that carries. Moving on. Item 8.2.
Madam Mayor, did you want to move up the bylaw for this so Mr. Bolton doesn't have to stay on?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So that is,
It's bylaw 2023-09, it's item 12.3.
item 12.3. So we'll get that moved up, and does somebody want to pass that, make a motion to pass that? Councillor Verwoerd, seconded. Councillor Watt, all in favor, and that carries. And, what's that?
Is there a 20-day appeal period on these?
Yep, that goes through the standard
Yes.
appeal process. So we are good to go on that. Thank you very much. Moving on then, item 8.2, we have a presentation from Tonabee Regional Conservation, Jeanette Levies-Smith, and I don't know if we have your chair with us today, or?
Unfortunately, he sends his regrets. My apologies. His apologies.
Well, the lectern is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for having me today, and I do appreciate a few minutes of your time. You have a very full agenda, or what appears to be a very full agenda, but I have to say you also have a very good chambers. I've been in a few chambers lately. I appreciate that you have the technology actually working. Not everybody has managed to do that, so congratulations. We certainly haven't been able to do that. So thank you very much. Next slide, please. Recognizing that I am new, I'm new in my position. I started in July of last year, and that there was also a municipal election, and a lot of new councillors, and now a lot of new councils. There was just an opportunity to go around and introduce ourselves and say hello. And so a little bit of a roadshow, if you will. And the board chair is able to make most of them, but not all of them, but sends his regrets for tonight. Next slide, please. So want to recognize and thank Councillor Verwoerd for being on the board. This is the board for Tonabee Conservation Authority. It is governed by the Conservation Act in terms of the number of representatives from each of the municipalities. So there are 8 municipalities, 11 board members, and that is based on the population of the municipalities, as determined by the Act. So some of them are returning board members, and some of them are new to our path. So a good mix. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just a snapshot of our watershed. It's always good to have this up. It reminds us of actually how large our land base of our watershed is. We're the 17th largest watershed in Ontario. You wouldn't actually think that, given how many, there are 36 conservation areas and 26 watersheds, but we're the 17th largest. And what I do like to point out here is obviously the population is growing as each of our municipalities are growing and developing. And also the hectares, the 10,000 plus 10,000 plus acres that we manage directly. So those are our trails and our conservation areas that we have. So it's a large area. Next slide, please. This is our current vision and mission and key goals that we have. It was established in our strategic planning exercise that the former board had undertaken in around 2020. They were planning to revisit that, but obviously they hit it, they put a little bit of a pause on it just because of the pandemic and trying to work through all of those issues. So this is something that the new board is going to be looking at, reviewing, making sure that it's still relevant for our organization. And while they're still going to do that, I can say that it is something that we do use as an organization. Certainly the vision and mission statements are very relevant to us, and also our key goals that we still continue to report out on. But there's a little bit of a check-in going to be happening over the next coming months. Next slide, please. So as we're doing the road shows, as I said, I'd like to give a little bit of a snapshot of 2022 and some of the things that were accomplished. I also like to include a little bit of information that's relevant to each of our municipal partners. So we did have a busy year. There is an upward trend in the number of planning applications and permits that we've processed. And I've included the numbers that we processed here in Douro-Dummer in 2022. We also had very popular our land stewardship programs around tree planting. And so they were very busy in 2022, planting over 2,000 trees in the township, 2 different properties, and also a lot of great partnership work that was done. They're really popular also with volunteerism, so we have a good call and lots of people helping out. And then also we did some naturalization work at the Warsaw back dam, again planting some more trees and shrubs to again help them. So with the schools. So, good partnerships and lots of good work. We continue to do our floodplain mapping in 2022, and we also have more in 2023 that is planned. And then we also provide our risk management, and we issue 14 flood messages here. And the last one I do like to highlight is our climate change strategy. So this is going to be our first full 2 years of implementing our climate change strategy. And we're really excited about trying to move that bar, if you will, that we've set, targets that we've set for ourselves. There's an outwardly facing component to the climate change strategy and an inwardly facing component. And what we're trying to do in 2023 is take that climate change strategy data that we're collecting and be able to share it back with the municipalities as well. In this coming year. So it's something that we've been working on since we've approved the climate change strategy. So more to come on that one. Next slide, please. We also, like I said, I believe yourselves, were successful in receiving some FedDev grants in 2022. And for us, it sort of really increased our capital work that we had, but we were very successful in completing some work on the Jackson Creek Trail. And one of the components that work finished in the end of 2022, but we were also successful in raising a lot of money, $61,000 from the community to help towards that project. So it's a well-loved asset and well-used by not just the city of Peterborough residents, but by the wider community as well. So we have more projects that we're completing in 2023 with DEV grant funding. So, next slide, please. So one of the objectives that the province of Ontario had given all conservation authorities across Ontario in 2021 and in 2022 was also around increasing our accountability and transparency. And so in part that goes to how we prepare our budgets. So you're going to be seeing a little bit of a change in 2023, 2024 budget, I should say. So one of the things that we've done this year, or I should say last year, is align our categories, our programs and inventories that we have with our budget, understanding what the tax levy is contributing in category 1 and in category 3, which are the two categories that we can do. And we're very fortunate to have our campgrounds. In particular, not all conservation authorities operate campgrounds. And this year, we will have a full year of another campground in Lakefield, in the Township of Selwyn. And those funds do help to keep our tax levy down in terms of things. So our budget, again, is not proportionate, but our increase for 2023 was 2.4 increase, which represents a little over $30,000 for autonomy conservation. So, yeah, and one of the things that we really do strive is to make sure that we're staying within our core mandates and measuring our effectiveness. So we do have performance objectives as an organization. We do report on them to the board and along with our financial positions quarterly. Next slide, please. So this is a slide just included in all of our presentations, just on apportionment. You might know this term as the tax levy. The province has changed that when they brought in the programs and inventory categories. And so you hear this word moving forward, apportionment, and we show it in our operating and capital in terms of things. Next slide, please. And this is our overall budget. So we have roughly a $3.2 million operating budget. This includes all of our revenue streams. So we have our apportionment / tax levy. We have our self-generated revenue, which is our campgrounds. We have agreements, donations, and other. Again, in moving forward, we're going to be able to have, or we are needing to have more clarity, more definition in terms of where the revenue streams are offsetting specifically the category 1 and category 2 service expenses that we have. So more breakdown, if you will. And again, all conservation authorities are needing to do that for the 2024 budget. Next slide, please. And in order to help keep our tax levy low, staff proposed just a moderate capital budget. Again, also realizing that we are completing some of our other capital work related to the FedDev grants. So this is a very modest capital budget that we have in terms of things. So it's just $105,000. And I think that just brings me sort of to the end. We are also in the process of doing some board orientations. We've had one already. We have our next meeting next week. We've tied them a little bit to right before our board meetings to be a little bit more efficient. And it's on programs and services. And you're welcome to, if anyone is interested, you're welcome to join in. At this point, we think it's still going to be virtual. We're looking for meeting space to be in person, but we haven't secured that yet. So with that, I think I'm happy to take any questions that your worship, council have. And thank you again for having me here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming, Jeanette. It's great to have you here in our chambers in person, and it's great to see that you're doing the circuit, if you will, and getting around and meeting folks. And personally, I look forward to seeing the data that's going to be coming out of that climate change strategy as that comes forward, and that information is available. But I'll hand it over to council. Any questions from council? Comments? Councilor Watt?
Three, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. And a lot of the stuff that Orca does is really advantageous to the surrounding areas, the lakes, the rivers, that kind of thing. I do have a question about one of your slides there, and it said about the planting vegetation, planting trees, and stuff like that, and the partnerships you've done. Has Orca ever touched base with Camp North? They've got a couple of big projects up there, and they're very eco-friendly, absolutely, like all the way stuff like that. They did a shoreline revitalization here a couple of years ago, started on one, and I think there's still more work to be done, so it may be a good partnership to look into. I think Jacob would welcome a call.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I wrote that one down. I do know that there had been programs and things in the past, but I also really appreciate you raising it because I do think the mandates are very much aligned there. So, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilor Ward?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Jeanette, for the presentation and in my involvement up to this point, being on the board, having a chance to meet other people on the board and Jeanette, as well as some other staff with Orca. I would say there's a lot of very talented people that are passionate about the work that Orca does. And I think there's a great opportunity for council through various committees that we do have that perhaps don't report directly to Orca. There is an opportunity just to use the expertise that Orca has to provide some input to some of the decisions that we make that don't directly go through Orca.
Excellent. Councilor Johnson?
Madam Chair, I also want to thank you for coming to the presentation. I must say, it's nice to see those trees that are planted, but you know, we lost that many trees with that storm, so, you know, it sounds like a big number, but we lost a big number in the township. But anyways, I know you got your work cut out for you, thanks for taking on the work.
Through you, through you, Madam Mayor. Thanks a lot, Jeanette, for coming out and your presentation. I have one question that kind of sticks out in my mind is, which is the largest watershed, conservation area that is the largest watershed in Ontario? Do you know offhand who that would be?
That, Madam Mayor, that's a great question. I believe it's the Grand River Conservation Area.
Thank you very much.
It was one of the first established in terms of it, but it's a very long river too, right?
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I appreciate Councillor Root's comment. If there is any assistance that we can give or on any other projects that you might have, we're happy to help. We do help or assist where we can on some trails and recreation committees, in particular with some of the municipalities. And especially also if we have little projects going on, we're also happy to assist there. And I do appreciate the comment about trees. We're still doing some cleanup in some of our conservation areas. We've managed to do the emergency components and the trails and the access points. But we were one that files a large insurance claim to receive some compensation to clean up the rest of the work. Warsaw Conservation Area being one of those areas as well.
It's a good point. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
And I think we're going to be successful, so more work to come in 2023.
Great to hear. All right, assuming there's no further questions from council, thank you, Jeanette, for your time, and don't be a stranger. Again,
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And could I get a motion, please, to receive that report? Councillor Johnson, Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor? And that carries. Okay, next up, we have Carrie Snoddy, who's joining us on Zoom. Hello, Carrie, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me. Good, how are you doing?
Great. And Kira, you're here to talk to us about the Blue Box transition, so I'll hand it on over to you.
Sure, no problem. I'm not sure if I should share my presentation or if it will be shared if you can see it or not.
Okay, I think you have the ability to share your presentation.
Okay, let me do that.
Oh, you had it.
Just making sure I have the right one here. This happened to me earlier. Okay, I hope you can see that.
Indeed, thank you.
Great, thank you again for having me this evening. The goal of this presentation is to get Douro-Dummer councils up to speed on the transition to producer responsibility of the Blue Box program, as well as upcoming decisions you'll have the opportunity to make on this change. So to start, what is producer responsibility? It's a regulatory approach to waste management where producers or companies that are making and importing products are responsible for the waste generated from them and the cost to collect and recycle those. And in Ontario, the Blue Box program is transitioning from a model of shared industry funding to one of producer responsibility. So currently, on the left, this is the shared industry funding model we're operating in, where the local government or municipalities operating the Blue Box program, and producers are funding about 50% of the cost to do that, where in the new program on the right, producers will be responsible to operate the program, manage it, and cover all of the costs to do so. There are a couple pieces of relevant legislation that are moving this change forward. The first is the Environmental Protection Act and Ontario Regulation 10194. This is the older legislation. It's been around since 1994, and it regulates and makes municipalities responsible for operating Blue Box programs. So they're legislated to do so under this legislation, but this legislation will be wrapping up because of the newer legislation. And this is the legislation that was passed in 2016 by the province, the Waste Free Ontario Act, which includes the Waste Diversion Transition Act and the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act. And this was passed by the province in 2016 with the ultimate goal to make producers who create these products and put them in the Ontario marketplace responsible for recycling them and creating more of a circular economy. A few of the programs have already transitioned to producer responsibility, and these are batteries, electronics, hazardous waste, and tires. And so now Blue Box, the largest program, is moving towards this new legislation. There was a regulation passed under this in 2021 for the Blue Box, which has all of the specific details in it on what producers are required to do and what targets they have to meet. So how the county township Blue Box program currently works is that the county administers the Blue Box program on behalf of the townships. The county holds a contract with Mterra, who performs curbside collection, depot or transfer station collection and processing of the Blue Box material. The county submits a report each year called the data call to the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, and we receive about 50% funding back to offset the cost to operate the program. And the county supplies the infrastructure at the depots or transfer stations, the front end bins to allow Blue Box collection at the township-owned transfer stations. So under this new producer responsibility framework for the Blue Box, there are eligible sources and non-eligible sources. The eligible sources are the types of properties that producers are required to collect from. And so these include residences, which are single-family homes and seasonal homes, facilities, which are multi-residential buildings, not-for-profit long-term care homes, retirement homes, and schools, as well as public spaces. And there are also non-eligible sources, which I will touch on later in the presentation. So there will be a transition period from July 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025. And during this 2.5-year period, every single municipality, First Nation community throughout Ontario has been assigned a specific transition date where they will move to producer responsibility. And so all of the townships in Peterborough County transition January 1st, 2024. Municipalities can choose to negotiate with a producer responsibility organization to continue service delivery during this transition period or fully divest their responsibility. And the County of Peterborough has chosen to divest on January 1st, 2024. And then there's the post-transition period, which is January 1st, 2026 and afterwards. And so at this point, all municipalities in Ontario will have transitioned to producer responsibility, and producers will be responsible for all aspects of the Blue Box program. So communication, replacing blue boxes, they have specific recycling targets they have to meet, and they have to follow everything that's in the regulation for the entire province at that point. And so again, all townships have been given the transition date of January 1st, 2024. So what types of materials are going to be included in this new Blue Box program? It depends on the timing. So during the transition period, so that would be January 1st, 2024 until the end of 2025, producers have to collect the same materials that we are currently collecting in the Blue Box in Peterborough County. So there won't be any changes to what's included, what's recyclable, what's not recyclable during that time period. Starting in January 1st, 2026, producers have to collect a designated material list under the new regulation. So this slide shows on the left-hand side, these are just typical materials that municipalities are collecting right now, but it varies by municipality. And on the right-hand side, these are the types of materials that are included in the new Blue Box program. So it's an advanced list of materials. They will be collecting everything that Peterborough County is collecting right now, plus additional materials. So things that we aren't currently collecting, like styrofoam and single-use products like cutlery, straws, and plates, things like that. And so a good thing about this regulation and this change is that right now, it's different in every community in Ontario, what's recyclable and what isn't. What's recyclable in Douro-Dummer may not be recyclable in Toronto, may not be recyclable in City of Kawartha Lakes or somewhere else even close by. But with this new program starting in 2026, there will be one list of what's recyclable and what's not across the whole province. And a little bit of language differentiation is there are producers and there's producer responsibility organizations in this new world of Blue Box. So producers are the brand holders, importers, and retailers of products that contain Blue Box materials. So it's any company that's selling products into the Ontario market. And this includes things like grocery store foods with packaging, retail store items with packaging, and fast food packaging. A producer responsibility organization is one company that's representing many different producers. Producers can sign on with them to work with them, and they help them meet their targets under the regulation. So the producers can sign on with them, and they essentially operate the Blue Box on behalf of the producers. The producers pay their money that they're required to pay to these pros or producer responsibility organizations. And this is an example of that. So we see a list of producers, some of the biggest producers on the left-hand side of this slide. And then you can see that all of these producers have signed on with this Pro Circular Materials. There are about 5 or 6 pros in Ontario, but Circular Materials is the biggest pro. They have the vast majority of producers signed on with them. And so because of that, they have taken responsibility for the common collection system in Ontario. So they're overseeing all collection throughout the province of blue box materials. They will procure and award agreements for collection, and they've also hired a company called Reverse Logistics Group to help arrange and manage those agreements. And municipalities have to share critical details about their blue box program and eligible sources before the transition period so that it's a smooth handover for them. So by overseeing the common collection system, it means they'll ensure curbside and depot collection for all eligible sources throughout the province. They'll determine the location of the receiving facilities, which are the locations where the recyclable material gets consolidated, and they'll also determine the location of the recycling facilities. So given the extensive scope of work and limited timeline to implement this province-wide collection system, CMO presented a standard offer to all municipalities in Ontario requesting that they provide interim blue box services during their transition period. So continue to operate the program and essentially contract with CMO to do that. So municipalities have 2 options. They can opt in or opt out. If they opt in, they would be assigning agreements with commercial terms set by CMO and become a contractor to them during the transition period. If they opt out, CMO will secure arrangements with an alternative service provider, likely the collection contractor that's already performing service in that municipality. So as I mentioned, Peterborough County Council has decided to opt out of all services, and there's a link to the council report in the presentation. There's an opportunity for townships to contract with CMO if you wish to do so for depot operations, to allow CMO to use a township depot or transfer station to meet their legislated requirements. And townships would be compensated for this service. So since Peterborough County's opted out of all services, CMO's approached the current contractor, Mterra, to offer them an agreement to continue servicing all townships for curbside collection and collection from the transfer stations. And CMO's required by the legislation to collect blue box material from the same number of depots or transfer stations that are currently being used in each township during the transition period. So to meet their requirements, they either have to contract with you to collect from your transfer station, or they have to open up a transfer station somewhere else in Douro-Dummer during the transition period to collect blue box material. And so they're offering contracts to townships for depot operations to allow them to continue to use your depots. So township have the same 2 options. You could opt in or opt out. If you opt in, you would be signing a contract with CMO for depot operations. And some pros to this would be that blue box services will remain at the current transfer station. Townships will also receive payments from CMO for your blue box operations. Cons would be that townships have to agree to CMO's contract terms. We haven't seen what the contract terms will be yet. And the payments will be standardized for all townships. So the payments will be a standard payment based on studies that they have completed on what depot operations costs typically are. And it will be the same standard payment offered to all townships. It won't be based on your actual costs. So if you opt out, you do not sign on with CMO, and you would no longer essentially be collecting blue box material at the transfer station. Some pros to this are that the township would have no responsibility for the blue box program, and you would not have to follow CMO's contract terms. There may also be additional space at the transfer station to use for other diversion programs because the blue box front end bins won't be there anymore. Cons would be that CMO would have to offer blue box depot services at another location in Douro-Dummer. So this would be potentially inconvenient for residents if they're bringing their garbage or other recyclable materials to the transfer station, and they would have to bring their blue box materials to a different location. And the other con is that the townships wouldn't receive any payments. So as far as next steps, SEMO has scheduled a meeting with each township. That's been confirmed with Douro-Dummer staff and county staff. It's at the beginning of March, on March 2nd. And so county staff, again, will be present at this first meeting to help assist. SEMO is preparing a contract document to present to each township. We've asked that they provide this contract document prior to this March 2nd meeting, so that way township staff get some time to review the document ahead of time if they have any questions or concerns. They also will be providing a standard payment model. We also have asked that they provide this to townships prior to this first meeting, again, so you have a chance to take a look at it and see if it's reasonable. As far as site infrastructure, the county currently owns the front-end bins at the transfer stations for blue box material. During the transition, there's an option for the county to either transfer ownership of the bins to the townships or the contractor servicing the transfer station. And after the transition, SEMO will require the contractor to provide bins at depot. And then once the townships have met with SEMO and reviewed the offers and they have a chance to negotiate with SEMO, then they can bring that to your council to ultimately make a decision. And county staff are here to assist with information whenever we can. And then the last thing that I want to touch on in this presentation is the non-eligible sources that I mentioned at the beginning. So all of these locations on the right-hand side of the slide, commercial properties, municipal properties, places of worship, they're all considered non-eligible under this new regulation. So producers are not required to collect from these locations. They have said that they will allow this material to be mixed in with eligible material during the transition period only. And then essentially municipalities would pay a cost to have that material managed by them during the transition period. After the transition period on January 1st, 2026, they will not allow this material to be mixed in. The county currently collects recycling curbside from about 600 of these non-eligible sources. And in Douro-Dummer, there's about 55 locations curbside that we collect from that are not eligible. And these locations are also able to use depots or transfer stations for recycling drop-off. And so county staff are working on options to present to county council on whether the county continues to provide blue box services for these non-eligible sources starting in 2024 and how we might fund this program. So we have essentially three options. I won't get into too much detail on them today, but option number one, and this is mainly for curbside collection, is that the county continues to collect from these non-eligible sources, and the recycling program will be paid for by the residential and commercial tax levies. So this is how the program is currently funded. But in this option, residents would be subsidizing some of the costs to collect from those commercial locations. Or we could continue to collect from these non-eligible sources and only tax the commercial properties since they will be the ones that are using this service. This would be potentially a tax increase to them for collection of the blue box material because their costs are currently being offset by the residential tax levy. And then option three would be that we stop collecting blue box material from these locations and they would be responsible for setting up their own private arrangements for blue box collection. So the county staff will be surveying non-eligible sources on their preferred option early this year. We have the list of locations we currently collect from, so we're planning on sending them a letter. We want to communicate with them, let them know that there's a change coming, just so they're not blindsided by the change, and then have to fill out a survey on what their preferred option would be. So if you do receive any phone calls or emails from these locations asking about this when we send the survey out, please feel free to direct any inquiries to county staff to help answer any questions. As far as the non-eligible sources at depots, if you do decide to contract with CMO to continue to collect at your transfer station, CMO is allowing that the material can be in during the transition period at the bins at the transfer stations as well. They will assume that 25% of the blue box material in those bins is from non-eligible sources, but they have developed a guidance document where you can prove, there's a few different ways that you can prove that it's less than that, which I do think is the case. And we're working with township staff on working through that. And essentially, once they land on the percentage of non-eligible sources, they would take the costs of managing that material off of your regular payments that you would be receiving from them. And so finally, at the end of this presentation, I just have a summary of and next steps. So all townships transition to producer responsibility January 1, 2024. The county's opted out of providing blue box services. CMO will be responsible for providing a contractor for curbside collection and collection at the transfer stations. And they're interested in working with townships for depot operations so they can meet their legislative requirements. And they've set up meetings with the townships. We're still waiting on their contract documents and payment models. But then ultimately township councils can determine whether the townships will contract with CMO or not. And then county staff will continue to work with townships on non-eligible source options at the transfer stations. We'll be sending out the survey to the non-eligible sources and then bringing a report to county council to determine how to move forward with those non-eligible sources, particularly for curbside collection. And again, county staff are available to assist townships wherever needed. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Carrie, for all of that information. Certainly having had the benefit of the presentation to County Council, it's taken a lot of work and effort and time to even get this far, and there's still quite a bit to go. And we certainly do appreciate your support and knowledge and information along the way. So thank you for that. Over to Council. Any questions of Carrie on what is to come? Seeing nothing at all. Deputy Mayor Nelson.
To you, Madam Mayor. Thanks a lot, Carrie, for your presentation. And after seeing it twice, I think I'm a little more conversed on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Watt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Carrie. Excellent. It's a lot to absorb, and I'm sure we're going to have questions from people all around the township. Oh, is this going to change? Is this going to change? But it's a work in progress, and it'll work. But I'm sure our staff is well versed on what's going on too, and they'll come back with a recommendation of what we should do to look after our township. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Watt. Carrie, just a quick question on my end. You had mentioned the certain items in the blue bin. Fortunately, all that's already being collected through Peterborough County is going to be allowed, but then there are some additional items that will be allowed, specifically styrofoam and single-use products will be allowed in the new system in 2026, like post-transition. My question is, do we have a sense currently on the impact that this will have on landfill in the future? Or I guess the first question is, where does this go now? And I know styrofoam is treated, I believe styrofoam is treated as hazardous materials, but the single-use products, paper plates, spoons, cutlery, that kind of thing, typically goes in landfill is my guess. But will that have a positive impact on landfill locally?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I believe that we should see some benefits to less plastic and recyclable material going into landfill. That also depends though, because these producers are going to be responsible for promotion education. And so I think it's also going to depend on how well they inform residents that these items are recyclable now. I know that as the county, we want to have a part in that and make sure we're educating our residents that these things can go in the blue box, even if we're not necessarily managing those products anymore. So I think that will have an impact. But the challenge also will be that we won't have the data of what's being collected in the Blue Box program once the producers take over. So we won't really be accurately be able to measure that, whether the diversion rate has increased or decreased going to landfill. It will be more speculative.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think personally, when that change happens, to your point, you know, the education of residents, although it's not the county's responsibility to make sure what goes what in the Blue Box, but to keep it out of landfill would be, you know, the good messaging there when that time comes.
Definitely.
Great. All right, well, thank you again, Carrie, for your information. I'm sure staff and council will reach out with any questions. From council, can I get a motion to receive Carrie's presentation today? Deputy Mayor Nelson, Councillor Watt, all in favor? And that carries. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Okay, moving on, we have items, other business and staff reports, 9.1, the report and capital project status. Any questions of our CAO on that report from council? Councilor Watt?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for this. It's always very beneficial for telling us where we are, where we stand, when things are coming up. It's a really good tool. And I see the one item which I know we've had quite a bit of go on was the building department customer service policy and wait times. And I see it's been out, and I understand why it's been pushed out so far, but I just want to, you know, make sure that it's going to come to us in the spring sometime and that we are making headway on where we're sitting with turnaround time at the moment.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Watt, absolutely. Don and I have had conversations just about that. I mean, how important it is for that to come back. So yes. Council will certainly see that. On another note, I will just let you know our short-term rental committee meeting is actually scheduled for the 22nd, not the 23rd. So we'll make sure we get that updated just for reference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the report from council? Seeing nothing further, can I get a motion to receive that, please? Deputy Mayor Nelson, Councillor Johnson, all in favor? And that carries. Fantastic, thank you. Item 9.2, 2023 user fees, and I believe our treasurer is taking the helm on this one. Paul, it's over to you, sir.
Thank you, and through your worship to council, just want to give a couple of notes on the report in front of you regarding the 2023 user fees. The actual report itself does highlight the changes that we've made to the user fee schedule. If there are questions on those specific changes that have been made, myself or the relevant manager can answer those questions tonight, or we'll do our best anyways. The one change that I will just kind of give a little bit of discussion on is the inflationary increase that we set at 3%. Because I know inflation for 2022 was quite a bit more than 3%. But where we've applied the 3%, we did a rather large increase. Not large, but we brought the rates up to market rates, especially in the arenas last year. So we felt that if we went above 3%, that may put us ahead of the market. And also the plan is to, going forward, to do an annual 3% increase. If we look at the average inflation over the last, I think it was 5 years in my report that I showed, it was 2.8%. So that's roughly what inflation is annually. And then what we'll do is every so often, whether it's 3-4 years, we might want to commit to a date, is do a market review of where arena fees, especially arena and parks fees, are at, but also our planning fees and building everything. I think there's periodic but regular reviews happening to compare ourselves to our neighbors, make sure that we are competitive. Only other thing I will mention is it was brought to staff's attention that the fee for box springs is still in the schedule. That was kind of an oversight because we are no longer collecting mattresses, and so the intention is not to collect box springs, but not mattresses. So we will be removing that from the schedule. And when I spoke to the clerk, she did indicate that given it's a clerical error, we can just update the table prior to it being posted on the website.
Okay, thank you for that. Paul, any questions from council?
So the chair.
Councilor Johnson?
This fee for the parks, for tennis and pickleball court rentals. Well, my concern more is the cafeteria part. If the concessions want to be used, when in the past, I think when people wanted to do the concessions, they used their own, eh? They rent themselves? Is that right?
Through your worship, in the past, it was basically based on request to use that area. It wasn't necessarily offered as a fee or advertised essentially at the time. I know years ago, youth baseball did run a little concession kind of out of that, but over time, it was just basically tournaments, rentals that kind of use that to be out of the weather and sheltered, to sell pop chips, burgers, based on whatever the nature of the tournament was for, whether it be a fundraiser or just an annual tournament, family tournament.
So the way it's set up now, this year, if they want to use the canteen there, they would have to rent it and then pay for it, right?
Correct.
Like, the thing is, we spent some big money there, whether we paid for it or whoever government give us some money towards it, but the thing is, I think we want to use it more and more all the time, compared to trying to punish the people for wanting to do a service to the whatever is going on, whether it be baseball or whatever. No, I don't see that we need to be charging that kind of money. I do appreciate the fact that we put in some big money there, like, through the grants that we got, but it just seems to me that we want to be used more than just 3 times a year, for instance, like the Douro-Dummer or something like that, tournament. I think that we want to try to use it more and more. Therefore, I think, like, with the money that got put into it, I think we gotta try to get them to use it more. And I don't think that fee is fair. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah. I do know that just some of the fee design was essentially to keep it in line with some other areas in the facilities that we do rent out. Also, with the new building going back into the park system, we're gonna have additional costs for hydro maintenance on the facilities, all that. So it was just a way to try to recoup some of those extra overhead costs in the future.
So
I'm not in favor of that.
I wonder if it would make sense then to have staff, because it's a new facility, basically, for us that we're renting out, to look at perhaps some business case uses and opportunities and see if that fee is in alignment and whether the user groups would be able to afford that, or if there's something there. Is that perhaps?
Yeah, I think so, because to me, most people will want to pay that kind of money because they don't make big money on it. And I don't know who's going to run the canteen on pickleball or whether it be a ball tournament. So they'd rather than run it, stock it, and should pay that fee on top. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
So when there's no money to be made, when you got to pay that down here $100, I can't see that they'd be interested in doing it. And then why we put it up there? Because before it was always free.
Councilor Vervoort?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can see the rationale for having the user fee there. If we construct a new facility, I think that the fee helps to recover some of the annual overhead costs like maintenance. If we make this a freebie and everyone can use it, it's great that there's usage, but there's going to be additional costs associated with upkeep of the facility. If there are very few organizations using it, we're going to see less maintenance costs, we'll see less usage, but the building will last longer. So it's definitely a balance between the two. I don't disagree with that, but I think we do need to be mindful of additional costs associated with running a facility too.
Councillor Johnson?
The chair, I'm not asking, or suggesting it should be free. And to say that it'd be used less, well, why do we put it there? If we're going to be concerned about using it twice a year, 3 times a year, I mean, why do we put it there? I know it's a new building and I know there are some costs, but I think that is just a lot of money right off the bat. I think if we can get using it, get going and using it, and give them more things to come in, whether it be, you know, tournament with the horseshoes, and pickleball, whatever it be, and start inviting people to use that at a lower rate, and then down the road, if we see that it's being used good and people will pay that, then increase it. But right now, I think that's a lot of money.
Councillor Brewer?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe that we should start off at this rate. I was actually thinking it might be higher. Monitor usage, if we can charge $100, why not, or whatever it might be. If it's used frequently, then obviously people are willing to pay it. And on the flip side, if we see limited usage, then I think there's some justification to lower the cost. And for those reasons, I would like to see, I would like to pass this as presented and have staff monitor usage of the facility going forward and just determine from there if cost reduction would be appropriate in the future.
Okay, well, there's some quasi-debate going on right now. We don't have a motion on the floor for any of the user fees report, so does somebody care to make a motion?
I will.
Councillor Brewer? And that motion is?
To accept.
To accept the user fees as presented?
Correct.
David Grant?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can ask a question, is there any thought about if a league or ball league or something come in and was going to, they're going to pay for the fields, is there any thought about maybe a blended rate for the field plus maybe the concession stand, or is that in, I apologize for, I don't see that, but.
Through your worship, currently the day tournament for baseballs is at $165 plus like taxes for the day, and that's per diamond. So we didn't, because we remodeled the parks fees last year, I'd asked Paul there not to increase those ball diamond fees because it was a big change to our users. We did see a bigger increase to our revenue for the summers over previous years. So we kind of decided to keep that, but because we're adding the new features, and that's where we can start to recoup our, have some other additional funds coming in. In the future, we could potentially, yes, blend or up our diamond fees for the tournament and have it include the concessions. We can look at that down the road or anything else. So that was the idea in regards to the new rental fees and keeping the ball diamond fees the same as last year.
Thanks, man.
Councillor Watt?
I'll second it just for communication and discussion, but I do have.
I assumed you had something to say.
If I could be, through you, Madam Mayor, Mike. So let's say the horseshoe pits there, they start a league, it's every Thursday night from 6 to 9, kind of like that, whatever I got. So, and somebody wants to offer something at the concession stand, whatever, open up. Is it that fee every night, or is that gonna cover the league? Like, that's another question, because I mean, $100 a night, something like that, nobody's gonna use it. It's.
Yeah, through your worship. Typically, just based on our night rentals, we usually just have men's groups at that diamond through the summer. We do have some youth baseball. Most of ours is the tournaments on weekends. So someone may be able to approach us, I guess, and we can look at altering the fee for an extended rental, I guess, as you're saying there. But just with the the ball men's leagues and the mixed leagues, it doesn't have a lot of people there other than the teams, so it's hard for a user or a group to come in and run it on a consistent night. I know that with our community centers, we've run into that same issue, and we have more hours rented, and our weekdays are a lot lower than, so they don't actually open the concessions during the week because they don't have the spectators in the facilities, and it's typically just game nights. So I believe our youth baseball only uses that diamond 2, maximum 3 nights a week, and it's only for 1 or 2 hours typically. So we can look at if somebody approaches us and wants to do that, we can look into that, and I'm sure.
And I think to that point, Mike, we do have a policy that allows user groups, and organizers of events from the community come to council and ask us for a rebate or credit back on their fees or rentals. So that might be an option as well. So where were we? We've got a motion on the floor from Councillor Bavort. Seconded by Councillor Watt. All in favor on that? Nightmares?
Yes.
You have something else to say?
Well, I just think they'd like let's monitor and see how it goes that we get. And if we do find that it's not working, or the fees too high, stuff like that we also look at, let's say only 2 or 3 groups use it over the summer, kind of like that, and we say, okay, we're gonna have to drop it down to $50 or $25. Those groups get compensated for that, because it's not fair to them to be the guinea pigs.
Fair enough, and I should have said, are there any opposed to the motion? Because we did call the vote on that, I didn't call all opposed, and I will say I was opposed to the motion. I don't know, Councillor Johnson as well. Your comments are heard and noted, and I think staff will continue to monitor that. It is a new facility, it's a new use for us, and to everyone's points, it would be a shame for it to sit there empty and not being used to the benefit of minor sport in the community. And we'll navigate that in the season ahead. Great, thank you. So we are done with the user fees. Moving on to item 9.3. Interim Treasurer Paul on the 2023 budget updated tables. I'll hand it over to you, please.
Thank you again, Your Worship. Through you to all members of council. So just want to make a few highlights on the report that is in front of you. At a high level, there were some changes made since the last time the budget was in front of you. One related to an input error that I caught. Unfortunately, it went the wrong way. And then bids and tenders, a small change there based on kicking off a project or the implementation project and having some internal discussions about the funding model of running bids and tenders. And so if there's any questions on those, we'll be happy to answer those. We're also looking for direction on the funding strategy of the joint facility. The project was approved last year, but the costs have changed quite significantly, and the inputs into the debenture that will be required to finance the project have changed. So I'm sure there may be some conversations there, but we're able to answer any questions regarding those options, and I should mention, those are just kind of some high-level options. They may change once all costs and inputs are known, but it provides a general framework for how we will finance it going forward. And then the last recommendation on the report is really just to open the floor at that point to any and all comments, questions, recommendations from council regarding the budget as it's presented in front of you. So, you have all up-to-date tables that are attached to the report. And then, if I may, just a few comments before council jumps into all their deliberations. you know, I just want to comment that when I do prepare a budget, my goal is to typically maintain current service levels. And then if there are any changes up or down, those are kind of what get highlighted in the budget. And the subsequent presentations that I make to council. I also try to prepare a budget that I feel promotes fiscal sustainability by balancing the amount of asset management projects, so the amount of money we're putting into maintaining our current assets, while maintaining the necessary reserves for future expenditures. With that said, I know more work needs to be done to fully understand our future asset management needs. We're in the midst and tail end of our asset management project. I intend to bring that to council likely spring of this year. Along with that will be an updated reserve and reserve fund forecast, and hopefully a updated reserve and reserve fund policy that dictates the desired level of funds in each reserve. So with that said, I hope there's some good debate and discussion, and I'll turn it back over to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Okay, council, what shall we do? Where do you want to go from here, folks?
Through Madam Mayor, in my review of this, I've really started looking at capital project expenditures as maybe a nice starting point in terms of specific items to address. Does that sound like a fair approach?
Sure. The floor is yours.
All right. So I have a number of changes that I would like to see made to the budget, and would we like to discuss each of them individually, or do you want them packaged by area?
How do you have them organized? Maybe just run them down. I think what we're going to need here, and what our treasurer is asking for are some motions and agreement, consensus from council on specific items that we want to, heaven forbid, dare I say, add to the budget. I would say more so decrease and remove from the budget. So if you want to kick us off by running off an item and...
First item through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to defer the truck purchase for the bylaw and septic group. Defer that $48,500 expenditure, which is currently coming out of the reserves. The department has a new truck. I'm not too certain that we need two at this time, and defer this till next year and discuss further at that point.
Okay, so we'll just deal with that one. So you've made a motion to defer that from the building department budget. Is there someone who will second that motion?
We'll second that.
Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor?
Are we going to get an opportunity to...
That carries.
Discuss?
Would you like an opportunity to defend it, staff?
I just think if there's any comments from staff, they may, there's some obviously comments in the budget document. There may be more beyond what's in there, justification and consequences of any decisions that are being thrown out.
That's fair. That's a fair point. Thank you. In light of that motion, would you like to comment?
I may not.
And we'll slow the roll after that. Don, over to you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I may seek clarification first on why we were hoping to remove the truck from the budget.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand that previously, when the building inspector would go out, there was mileage paid, and there's already one truck in the fleet. Having two trucks seems a little bit excessive, especially I think when we look at the cost of fuel these days. Is a truck entirely necessary? Let's face it, people are going out to inspect a septic bed. They're not going hauling a trailer along with them or carrying huge equipment. I think a small car might be more cost effective on the fuel side of things as opposed to a nearly $50,000 truck when we're looking at a very significant tax increase for ratepayers. As I say, I think this is something we can revisit in the future, but at this point, it seems like something that can be deferred for at least a year.
Does that answer your question, Don?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think, so I've heard a few concerns in that and I appreciate them. I think a few that I'd like to just maybe discuss is the truck purchase, if I'm not mistaken, does not affect the tax levy. It is fully funded out of the building budget and does not touch the increase that the ratepayer would see in their taxes. And yeah, by all means.
Through you, Madam Mayor. My issue is a combination of the levy and the reserves. I understand through communication through our interim treasurer that we are looking at a budget that significantly depletes the township's reserves. And so I understand that different departments have different reserves set aside, but I think in this time of rapid inflation, increased levy, I think some financial prudence and reining in spending is a good idea.
So this isn't intended to be a debate between staff and council. I'd just like to call that out. So, I mean, at this point in time, council has passed a motion to defer. So, and given the fact that it does, this particular item comes from the building department revenue and reserves. It's something that I believe the motion said to not at this time to look at a future date. So perhaps it's something that building can bring back in the future and make a business case for that one instead of belaboring a motion that's already been passed. Unless there is a motion from council to reconsider on this particular item, just from a purely procedural perspective. In which case I believe we would need 2/3 to pass that. So I don't see hands up for staff to reconsider this particular one. We will slow down on the future items line by line. And Paul, comment?
Yeah, for sure, through your worship. I will need to adjust and obviously increase mileage accordingly. We do have additional building inspector that was not present before. I know there have been concerns in the past with driving personal vehicles onto construction sites. And so those are some of the items that will come back maybe sooner rather than later. And that was the reason for the vehicle. And just the only other comment I would say is in terms of the truck, I know that when the RFP went out last time, it asked for an all-wheel drive vehicle. And the proposals that came in ended up being a truck. So, point taken, that doesn't need to be a big pickup. But I think given the sites that vehicle typically drives onto, sometimes who knows the type of road or access, it has typically been an all-wheel drive vehicle. And I don't think we can typically ask staff to have an all-wheel drive vehicle to get onto those sites. So it may limit certain, and we'll have to just reflect the budget accordingly, and we will do that work.
Okay, thank you. And like I say, staff can come back at a future date since it isn't specifically to the levy and we've already got that on the books at this point. Okay, so we'll do a reset on the process. Councilor Verwoerd, your next item, and you can state your reasons for concern and ask questions of staff to clarify. And if you want to make a motion to an item, then we'll have conversation around it before we actually call for a vote.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor. Another item on my list here is the Fire Hall Station 2 parking lot resurfacing. This comes out of levy, out of cost here of $30,000. Rationale behind this one being, although the parking lot surface is by no means exceptional at this point in time. Going back to my previous comment about trying to keep levy increases to a minimum this year, we're looking at over 9% already, and I think this is just that type of increase is out of step with county and other jurisdictions at this point. I think if we look around throughout the province, we see a lot of levels of municipal government, whether it be the City of Toronto or other townships or cities, looking at increases that aren't even close to what we're looking at. They seem to be in that 6% range. And as I said, I think we need to reevaluate some of these items. Not saying never to resurfacing a parking lot, because it does need to happen at some point, but not everything needs to happen this year.
Okay, so is that a motion
I will
on
make a
that?
motion to defer that request until next year.
And is a member of council willing and interested in seconding that? And then we'll open up for discussion and questions with staff.
Yeah, I'll second it
Councillor Johnson?
with the questions, yeah. Chair.
Floor is yours.
Now, as far as over at the garage there, the fire hall, and where the trucks go in that, like it's that new part there. Is there not something that we could do where they're spending the big money like that for asphalting right now? So like putting fine gravel down or something in that one area?
Chief?
So through you, Mayor, yeah, if you want to, extend this out, I think the biggest issue is the ponding of water. And obviously we don't want it to go into the building, we want it to go away from the building. So we could, if you would reconsider, we could say to reduce it to $10,000, which would remove the area that's low, and we could regrade that packet and just have it gravel. So we wouldn't have to surface treat it at this time, but we could gravel it and have the water move away from the areas at a reduced amount, probably around $10,000, according to Jake's gravel calculator that we looked at. So when we break that apart, that's probably what we would do with that. If you would consider that, we could eliminate the issue of the water standing and maybe spread that over a 2-year project.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Just a moment. Councillor Johnson, did you still have any questions or follow-up?
No, I don't have a problem from 30 to 10. I don't have a problem at all, but we'll let the committee motion.
I'd like to adjust my motion to reflect the updated cost and description of the project just provided, from $30,000 down to 10.
And we had a seconder on that.
That was Councillor
Councillor Johnson, I apologize.
Support that revised.
You're okay with that? Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council to staff
That's a good idea.
on that? Let's call a vote on that one then. All in favor? That carries. Councillor Vervoort, you are working down a list?
I am. So the next item is in general government consulting fees. Pay equity review, which would come out of the levy in the amount of $10,000. I understand from communication that this is not a regulatory requirement through the Municipal Act or provincial government. It is definitely a recommended type of project that be conducted on a regular basis. I understand it's been a number of years since that has been completed and there have been new job descriptions, etc. And on the other hand, the reason why I would like to make the motion to defer this project until next year is that it doesn't appear at this time that there's a significant amount of concern or angst amongst staff in the township that they feel pay is inequitable.
Okay, so you're making a motion to defer that?
Yes.
Is there a member of council who is interested in seconding that motion?
No.
Councillor Johnson. Leanna, is that you? General government is your department?
I'll just speak to the project as a whole, if I may. When I originally came on board, there was some work that needed to be done. We did an org review. We did look at the jobs. We did some reorging as far as a lot of our admin, changed our positions, changed our job descriptions. We moved forward from there, did the compensation review, and have had those jobs evaluated. So when we looked at our pay equity review, which I believe was actually completed in full in 2006, they had done some work along the way as new jobs came in, but with the amount of change that had occurred, we brought this project forward with the final step being the pay equity review. My only thought to getting it done, and I know it doesn't appear that there's a necessity immediately. We have done sort of a high-level check. We don't anticipate, based on the job evaluations that we've done, there appears to be a male and a female almost in every category. We don't anticipate that there's going to be any large gaps. Maybe the best time to go ahead and do it though, because in the event that there are, it's retroactively paid to, our last review. So that is why we wanted to move forward with it. It may come in slightly less because we've done so much work already. It is the same consultant that we've used for the job evaluation. We did use an alternative consultant for the compensation review, but he has all of that data as moving forward. So it's not a huge time commitment for him to do. We may be able to have that completed at less than the $10,000. I would prefer to get it done if council chooses to defer it. We can ask him to hold off until 2024. But it's sort of the end piece of a project that can start back in 2021.
Any other questions or comments from council on that item? Lots of wheels turning. Seeing no others, we've got a motion on the floor. All in favor? And that motion fails. Councillor Vergort, still?
Yes, I do have a couple with respect to roads.
Okay.
These are two items, both out of the levy. I'm going to start with a couple of, I'm going to call them a little bit less contentious items. One of them being surface treatment of Caves Road from County Road 4 to Cooper Road, in the amount of $18,475. This is a road, Caves Road, that is used very significantly by folks coming in from out of town to go to the Warsaw Caves campground, which is operated by Orca, and it's my opinion that we should collaborate with Orca to see if there's an opportunity to cost share. If 90% of the traffic in the summertime is going to a campground that generates profit for Orca, I think it's worth the discussion with them to make the road better than it currently is and share some of that cost with them. So I would like to defer that that expenditure until such a time that we're able to have that discussion with Orca and look for a cost sharing opportunity.
Is there anyone interested in seconding that motion?
So that's your motion?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Councillor Johnson?
Like, something, speaking over and above this, like, somehow, we've got to get down to something like about 6%, somehow. I'm saying that from my heart, dude, I'm not accepting anything like what we've got. So, I mean, anything that we can help get other people to help out or refer, I'm really pushing to get that done. So, that's where I stand. As I say, I'll second these because they're good ideas and good thought. That's my comment.
And I will throw it over to Jake. I have a question on the motion. I'll jump in. Have we ever cost shared a road with, or any work, public works wise, not necessarily with another municipality, but with another partner? I know at one time there was talk around Strickland Street there by Morton Community Healthcare Center for water access and doing that road, and that didn't come to fruition. But what do those conversations look like historically, and is that is it a viable option?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that was before my time that the conversations that took place for Strickland Street. Other than partnering with neighboring municipalities on a dividing road, it's something staff could look into with Orca. I know we do work with Orca for their parking lot to do some maintenance on the parking lot to, just be a good neighbor and help them out in the springtime to sweep the parking lot and clean up the debris. That particular project, I can just speak on that. It is coming up next year, that road to be completely reconstructed, or on the schedule to be reconstructed. So it was just a small portion that I thought we could get some ditching and brushing done in this year to split those costs up a little bit, so it's not so large next year.
So it's prep work basically for the
Yeah.
larger project, is that what you're saying?
Through you, Madam Mayor. All of the brushing projects, I'm strongly in favor of those, just largely from a public safety perspective. But some of the surface treatment, as we said, this is part of a larger project. To me, it just makes a good amount of sense to go in once, get it all done in one shot. And if that is supposed to happen next year, that gives us some time to try to look for a cost-sharing arrangement with Orca, since they're essentially the major user of the road. It could almost be a private road.
Councillor Watt, did you have your hand up?
I did, through you, Madam Mayor. Jake, so this 18,475, that's just ditching and brushing for this year, not, it's under the surface treatment area, but it's just to get that work done so that when we're ready to fly next year, we're ready to fly. So, and getting some of that done, as Councillor Report just said, you know, the brushing and stuff like that is very important and helps us out big time liability wise and everything. So, getting that bit done this year for the 18,000 isn't out of line for me, and that still gives us lots of time to go to Orca for the big portion of the project, to, you know, the surface treatment, to get the road ready and stuff like that. So that's just kind of where I am at it. If that was just surface treatment, I could see that, but that's just more prep work and you know, to get the road started, to get ready. And with all the other projects we have throughout the year, stuff like that, you may not have time to get this all prepped and ready to go, especially with the traffic. You've got to do it in the summertime, you've got to do it, so it's, if we could split it up and alleviate, you know, parking or driving hazards and stuff like that, I don't have a problem with it.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Speaking to me, the motion again?
I noted Caves Road to County, Caves Road from County Road 4 to Cooper Road under surface treatment, 18,475. And then a little further north in the document here, under brushing, Caves Road from County 4 to Cooper Road for approximately $9,200. Those are two separate segments of the same.
No, so through you, Madam Mayor, the brushing is, it's in the brushing budget
right
for Caves Road. So the 18,000 is for the ditching and culvert replacements along the road. So the brushing is two different budgets, but it's all towards the same road section.
So,
and it's prep work again for the main reconstruction next year. The way I'm looking at it is if we look at next year's 2024's schedule, we're not gaining any ground. So the more we put off, the deeper the holes getting dug. So I'm not against putting it off. You know, like you said, we need to look at the budget and see what we can do. But just for council to be aware, next year, you know, we do have these large projects coming up.
any other questions or discussion from council? Councillor Johnson?
To the chair, now saying what you just said, like if we do take it off on paper and you had some time, you're doing something in the area, you could start doing some brushing or cleaning or whatever, could you not?
Well,
I mean, if we cut some things back, maybe that's going to save some time too on some projects.
Well, if you defer this project, it'll open up more time to do some other things. Yes, absolutely.
And that might be sneaking the odd day over there to do a little bit of brushing.
Well, we only have so much money in our brushing budget, so I also have operational brushing budget, but you know, we have, well, as this past storm that just went through, we need to keep that budget in place for some of these emergencies.
I like the idea of talking to autonomy conservation, and particularly if there is a larger forthcoming project. And as it sounds like we're doing a little bit of good neighbor support already through parking lot maintenance for them, so maybe looking at formalizing some sort of agreement around that to offset those road costs. Mary Nelson?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I can honestly tell you, in the past, Orca, it never has any extra money. And I can honestly tell you that it has always been the other way around. Township went and funded a lot of stuff. We have funded, being good neighbors, we went, they needed a few loads of gravel for their parking lot. There was a lot of in-kind work that was actually performed for Orca in the past. So I would not really hang my hat on forming a partnership to get much money out of Orca for any road projects. They will probably come back and say, it's our road, you just look after it. I don't mean to be, you can ask, there's never no harm in asking, but I would not hang my hat on expecting much from them, because like them, they get their funds from us. So there isn't really a lot of funds there that they have extra. They offset their funds by the camp funds, and yes, it's been a very, very, very busy campground that also spins off other stuff for our township as well, like other businesses and other things, and which is really vital for our community. So that's a great thing, and no harm in asking.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
That's not a motion. Councilor River, yes.
I appreciate the comments made there. As I say, I think kind of deferring this till next year when it is a larger project, go in there, get it all done at once. This gives us time to talk to Orca. They may indeed say no. And on a side note, I do appreciate the comment that we've been very neighborly with Orca, which is a positive thing. It's good to be a good neighbor, but we also need to be good to the ratepayer in this township too.
And on that, just to recap, we talked about 2 line items. Councilor Brevard, I want to make sure your motion, we're clear on that. The motion that's on the floor right now is the 18,470 or 475 for that piece of the work from Caves Road, Kenner Road to Cooper, is that correct?
That's correct.
What about the Russian?
The Russian is okay. That's a safety issue for $9 grand. I'm good with that.
Well, that's the motion that you seconded, Councilor Johnston, so we'll deal with that one. If you want to make a second one after, then so be it. So we'll call a vote on that. All in favor? All opposed? And that motion fails. Floor is yours.
Madam Mayor, just looking for, I guess, clarification in terms of the capital project here. 6-line South Downward from Division to Webster, so that would be the gravel road there. Is that a quote-unquote kind of full reconstruction, or is that just general maintenance of the road?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's gravel resurfacing. So council passed a few years ago that staff would be 3 inches of gravel on every 5 to 7 years. So these roads are now in a schedule to come up every 5 to 7 years to receive the 3 inches of gravel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I live on that road. I drive it every day. I would say from Division to Webster Road, there's really only one section of the road that's not very good, and that is roughly 300 feet at Webster Road. That's not so much a gravel issue as it is a ditching issue and water pooling on the road during spring and any type of flood season. I think it makes a lot of sense to address the specific area of the road as opposed to the whole road. As I say, I live on the road. It is in reasonably decent condition. I haven't heard any of the constituents on the road complain about its quality. They complain about other roads, but surprisingly not the one that we live on. And then kind of tie along with that from Webster Road to the northern limit. Pardon me, Division to Webster being roughly $38,000, and Webster to the north limit coming out of development charges for an additional $23,000. I would like to make the motion to remove both of those line items from the budget this year and have staff evaluate sections of the road that are in desperate need of immediate repair versus looking at a complete resurfacing of the road and looking at a possibility of stretching out some of these timeframes. Not all roads are used the same, so maybe instead of every 3 to 5 years, maybe it's 5 to 8, and let's try to stretch out that useful life.
Is there a member of council who will second that motion?
Yeah, I love the second.
Enthusiastically, Councillor Johnson.
Yep. And all I can say to the chair is that, like, we have all these roads and gravel and brushing and that. And I mean, some of them are mainstream, you know, like come spring, we need the grader out there fixing these roads, you know. And I think, you know, even though each one's got a ticket beside it, but I think you can kind of know which one needs to be done at that particular time. You know, I mean, they may have a list, and I totally appreciate you gotta have something. But saying that, I think that as you go around the roads and see what needs to be done, you have your list of what, you know, money there. But I think you can, I'm suggesting that you can go around and on some of these items and cut back on some and do some other stuff, whatever you're doing. All I can say is, again, is that somehow we gotta cut out some money, somehow. And if you look at all these things and see that, okay, example there, maybe the whole road don't need gravel. You know, I know the road I live on, there's spots on it that are very bad. And every year, you never know how bad it is until the spring comes and see how it broke up. But I think when we grade them and you go through them and check them, there might be some time and money that you can save as a whole compared to, you know, trying to dissect it. I don't think anybody wants to take the stuff away from the job you're doing, by no means. Because, I mean, that's what the people see and drive on, and they need the roads. But on the other hand, you know, like being on them, grading them like you did the last couple of years, that I think is doing great for maintaining those roads. So some of these things here, you know, they need to be done, but then I think you kind of have to spread around what you have to do.
Thank you for that. Any discussion on the motion? Actually, sorry, Councillor Watt, could I confirm your, restate your motion? Restate your motion. The clerk was asking just for clarification. I want to make sure that we're discussing the same thing here.
So the motion is to exclude 6 lines South Dummer division to Webster and then Webster to the northern limit. Exclude both of those capital projects and have staff evaluate specific smaller segments of the road that need treatment, which would come from the operating budget versus the capital budget.
When you stated your motion the first time, you also added a comment, and I'm not sure if it was part of the motion or just general comment, that staff investigate stretching out the gravel schedule from 5 to 7 years to a longer time frame. Was that part of this motion, or is that just commentary?
That would just be a general comment. That would be a different motion.
Yeah.
So are you good? You've got what you needed? Right, thank you. So, discussion on the motion, Councillor Watt, over to you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Wasn't all that long ago, we were fighting with taxpayers on conditions of the roads. And trouble is, this year, these 2 roads are, and next year it seems to be another road, like, so it jumps all over the place. And we can never say that, okay, this road's good this year, but next spring, it may be one that falls all apart. And that was the idea with our consultants and with the committee that was put together to start this process, get on a plan and try and get some of these hazard ones on, the ones that were continually up, but then there was always other ones that hiccuped for us and, you know, gave us more work. And we used to do 6 inches every whatever, stuff like that, and the recommendation was to put the schedule together, do 3 inches, but do it twice as often to keep them in that condition, and it was every road, because you never know. I mean, this spring your sixth line could have bust all to pieces, and you don't know, that's the trouble with that crystal ball. And this plan came from consultants and our group that we got together to stay on this process to make sure that our road stayed as best as possible. You're never gonna be perfect, but that was the idea, the intent of it. And that's why council went with this in all in one, I think it was 5 to 7 years, wasn't it? Every 5 to 7 to do 3 inches instead of 6 inches every 10, whatever, because 10 years it was gone completely wiped out, so the 3 alleviated. I think it has helped, and I don't want to go backwards on it.
Speaking for your second and final time on the motion, Councilor Moore.
As I'd like to reiterate, I live on the 6th line.
Yes.
I drive the road every day. I will say that I don't have a crystal ball of what this spring is going to look like, but I will tell you, since I moved to the township in December of 2018, the 300 feet of 6th line at Webster Road have never been good. It's consistently poor in the spring, much to Councillor Johnson's comment that there are specific segments of the road that are always miserable, and those ones need to be addressed versus the entire road. I don't drive the 6th line from Webster to Northern Limit. I walk it on a regular basis, but I don't drive it. Anytime that I have driven on there, again, there are a few problem areas, but as a whole, it's a reasonable road considering other gravel roads, not only in the township, but in the county.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? In this particular case, Councilor Watt, I hear your point, and tend to agree in terms of wanting to make sure that we have a good foundation in terms of our roads and a good plan. But considering that Councilor Report lives on this road and specifically knows the issues and is talking to the neighbors, I would be inclined to lend that credibility on this particular road. But curious if there's others that are going to be coming out of the conversation and budget today. So I will, on that, call the vote. All in favor? That carries. All opposed?
Can I get a question of clarification on that?
Sure.
The funding had DCs. Now, the DCs that I had used and applied, I did apply somewhat, not randomly, but to amounts that added to the amount that we had in the DC reserve to leverage that amount, or that funding source. And so would it be desired to move those DCs to another project and therefore free up, so you're kind of freeing up that full amount from the levy? Or is it just to leave that money in the DC reserve?
To you, Madam Mayor, I would like to see any funds kept in the appropriate pamphlets, so to speak. So any amounts that would be coming out of the levy, it reduces the levy, and any amounts coming that were allocated from the DCs, just to keep that in the DC reserve.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to make that as a motion. Any amounts that were budgeted from the levy be reduced from the levy, and any amounts that were budgeted from DCs be kept in the DC reserve.
And I see Councilor Johnson nodding your head. Is that a second? Yes, sir?
Yes.
Of course you can. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, through you, Madam Mayor, Paul, is that for every item that we've discussed? So is that the question for you?
Yeah, through your worship. This is the first one where I don't think the funding was clear, or that there were options in terms of how we apply the funding. So if I just look back, the fire parking lot was levy funded, so that was clear. And I believe the truck was reserve funded. There was only one source, there was only one option. And so, there wasn't a way to kind of move funds around with those motions. And so just with this one, there was that potential, and I just wanted to get clarification.
Or should we do it individual?
Well,
Because you don't know what else to.
correct, we don't know what's going to come up yet.
Through the chair, folks, please.
Through the chair. Through you, Madam Mayor. can we hold off on this motion until we have go through them all? I don't want to handcuff staff. I kind of want to handcuff staff in being able to move funds around to make it work the best, I guess, if I can say that.
You can certainly say that. We have a motion on the floor to direct them as such. Unless there's any other comment or question on the motion, we can call the vote and see. Oh, I thought, sorry, Councillor Johnson, you seconded that, right? Yeah. Councillor Watt?
Through Madam Mayor, would the mover be interested in just doing the levy part right now, and then we'll do all the DC ones at the end? You know, in case, like, as Councillor or Deputy Mayor, or do you want to do each one individually?
Through Madam Mayor, I would like to do each of them individually as we're doing, as I say, the DC items, just because they're sitting there as development charges in the reserves. It doesn't mean they have to spend them today. They can sit there because as staff reevaluates projects as they come along, maybe they're funded out of the levy today, but maybe next year having some money sitting in reserves might be a more appropriate place to take funds from. As I say, my goal at this point is to look after the ratepayer and see this tax increase significantly reduced from the 9%.
Answer that question, Councillor Watt?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna call the vote on this. All in favor? That carries. All opposed?
If I may,
Yes.
before the next motion, just more of a, through your worship, to all council, I am keeping track. So if there's ever, of the changes that are made and the kind of impact of where we're sitting from a percent increase, I know I said this before, the percentage gets to me because it makes an assumption that our current funding level is correct, but it is the number that all residents see. So I understand the need to focus on it, but I am keeping track. And so if there's any questions. And the only other thing, and this was communicated in an email, and to all of council, it wasn't until later this afternoon, and I should have mentioned it earlier. In terms of the excavator, through discussions with the mayor, it's been historical practice to not include the trade-in amount, given it's an unknown. Now, in discussions with the manager of Public Works, we were able to confidently come up with a number that we are confident to forecast for this year's budget, which will lower that purchase, and that was $75,000. So that is kind of on the table to be amended for another $75,000 to be reduced from the purchase of the excavator. I'm not going to make that motion, but it is out there and it's available as an upcoming change.
Thank you for that, and thank you for not making motions.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just to follow up on that with a question, staff. The excavator that we currently own, I'm not familiar with the replacement policy on that, on how many years it's quote unquote up for replacement. Given that it's still worth $75,000, which is more than the cost of scrap metal, how much additional useful life is potentially there with that piece of equipment?
Sure. Jake, can you school council like you schooled me on the excavator, please?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So it has a 10-year life cycle. It's a 2014. It has about 8,200 hours on it. When you reach around 10,000 hours, you want to start, you're looking for an engine overhaul. You could be looking at some major repairs or major breakdowns, unexpected breakdowns. So, you have to look at those items. Your trade-in value is when you're going to get the most out of your machine. So if we can trade it or deal it at the time where its value is at most to somebody that may want it, then it helps us when we're purchasing a new one as well. So typically buyers buying some of this equipment through when they realize it's a municipally owned piece of equipment, the value is usually greater than you would buy from a private company, just because they typically are aware that it's well maintained and it's taken care of. So that's about the gist of that. The brush head is, so there are two different pieces of equipment, but typically buying them in as a combination will give you a better price. It's a 2005 or 2006, so it's been rebuilt a few times over the years. It's come to the point now where our mechanic is saying, you know, if we rebuild it again, we may have to buy a housing, which is more or less, you're buying the whole complete thing again, right? So the next time it could be a devastating breakdown or a major complete rebuild, which is just, you know, would be much less than buying a new one.
To you, Madam Mayor, is it possible to purchase brush head separately from the excavator at this point?
Great
Just
question,
on
Councilor.
some very, very rough math. The current excavator has 9 years into it already, 8,200 hours, so 900 hours per year. If we run it for another year, we get up to 9,000 hours. I agree that once we get to 10, it's time to start doing some work on it. And as you mentioned though too, the municipality does take good care of its equipment versus some private operators. So maybe it's worth $60,000 or $65,000 next year. Again, crystal ball question that we just don't know. So I'll let you answer that.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, that is a possibility. It is a separate piece of equipment, but it is universal. It can be put on whatever excavator you do purchase. But I would just caution again, council, that we do have 2 snowplow trucks that are due for replacement next year. And one is a 2010. So staff do look at opportunities to extend the lifetime or the life cycle. One is a 2010, one is 2011. So they're past their 10-year life cycle. There's, at this year's cost is a $700,000 get to the next year's budget. So you put another, at the excavator on top of that, you're gonna get up over $1 million. So just to be cautious of the purchases is that, like I say, it's the same with our equipment as it is with our roads. You know, it can lead to a snowball effect, and at some point you're gonna have to deal with it.
To you, Madam Mayor. Snow equipment was mentioned there. We've been very, very fortunate this winter to not have a lot of snow, and is it possible for that equipment to have its useful life extended yet another year, perhaps?
It would be up to council's decision, but like, as I've said, they are past their life cycle now, so.
I would like to make a motion that we hold off on the purchase of the excavator this year and purchase the new brush head, as you say. Like, it could have a very significant breakdown that would require the purchase of a new one. And this is a safety issue, so we do need to make sure brushing is completed. And for that reason, I would like to proceed with purchase of the brush head only and defer the excavator purchase until next year, unless there is a compelling reason, such as a major breakdown in the summertime, that necessitates the purchase.
So I followed your motion, Councillor, until that, unless there is.
Oh, unless there is.
I heard you,
Okay.
but I think that, correct me if I'm wrong from staff, if there is a major breakdown, that would necessitate the money would need to be in the budget in order to do that. So that you would be limiting their options or asking them to keep the money in the budget just in case of. So can you clarify that, please?
I would like to see that funding then set aside in a reserve until purchase next year, or unless there's a significant breakdown that requires a new excavator to be purchased this year. I would like to defer the purchase of capital equipment for as long as we possibly can. I do realize that there is a useful life to everything, but the municipality does take very good care of its equipment, and we can probably extend useful life of things maybe a little bit further than a private company could. And as Councillor Johnson and I have pointed out, we're looking at a very significant increase to the levy already here. So trying to minimize tax increases for ratepayers is one of my main priorities here.
Understood. So to clarify your motion, if I could attempt to summarize your comments and motion, you want to keep the money in the budget for the excavator, less the $75,000 I'm assuming is possible trade-in value, and not actually acquire or purchase said excavator until such time that we are required to do so,
Correct.
thus having no impact on the tax levy.
Correct.
And is somebody interested and willing to second that?
I will,
Councillor Johnson.
with a question to the chairman. Now, the excavator, if something went wrong with the head, because we only got one, right? We only got one,
Through you, Madam Mayor, one brush head?
Yeah.
That's right.
So we can always rent some stuff or get someone else to do some work, or we had to do some.
We'd have to, either hire a contractor or try to rent one of them.
So, when we go to order this stuff, is it readily available, or we gotta wait for a year or something for it to show up or anything, something like that?
When I spoke to the local dealer, they were able to provide it in 2023 if ordered in the spring.
I see, okay, so it is available. And then there are also places that we can rent them?
I'd have to look into the actual brush head, whether you can rent one of them, but there is contractors that do brushing, yes.
If it broke down for a month, then we could rent something? It's like we've had to do with the grader?
Yeah.
You know, like rent a grader for a month or something?
Yeah, there's a possibility to rent.
Okay.
Any discussion any discussion on the motion on the floor? Councillor Watt.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I guess being on council for, well, I know council has spent a lot longer than me, but, 4 terms or something like that, and this came up a number of years ago, and we ran into trouble and our excavator broke down, and we couldn't rent one. We couldn't buy one. We were totally, and that's an intricate piece of machinery that we use in this township, like Councilor Ward has said numerous times. It's, the brushing is a safety item. It's a must do. If that thing breaks down and we're out of it all summer, we're way behind the 8 ball. And, just next year, the price is probably gonna be even higher than what it is now, kind of like that. So if we just set the money aside, wait till next year, I know it's a lot of money, but I don't see putting equipment like that off that is a necessity to our ratepayers and our public works. And I think strike while the iron's hot and don't look for troubles, because I think that's what's gonna happen. It's getting close to that time, and I know we maintain them, but when it gets close to that time, I'm just afraid we're gonna have a replay of what happened a number of years ago, and we're gonna be sitting behind the 8 ball with no way to do it, because not everybody has one of those to rent. And contractors, if it breaks down in the summer, they're probably, anybody that does have one is probably already set with their whole summer and fall work, like spring, summer, fall work. They're not gonna, oh geez, I got that thing just sitting around in the backyard, I'll bring it out and rent it to you. It doesn't happen. Like, they're in the same as us. It's that time of year that we have to do it. So I say let's not fate and test fate, and let's do it and buy it.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Report for the last time on your motion.
Clarify, my motion is to just purchase the brush head, buy it this year, and defer the excavator until next year.
But keep the money in the budget?
But keep the money in the budget.
In the event of failure?
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Yes,
but, yeah.
yes. But the brush head is still a go ahead.
Okay, so seeing no more discussion, I think accountability to the taxpayer is important, and it's multifaceted, dollars and cents and long-term costs. I think that keeping the money in the budget has no impact to the levy that we're faced with, and leaves us in a position where we might be short in a construction season. But we'll see where it goes. I'll call the vote on it. All in favor? All opposed? And that motion fails. Where do we go from here? Councillor Vervoort, do you still have more on your list? I'm also conscious of the time, just to be aware, we do have a lot to get through on our agenda, and we will be looking probably to extend the hour in due course.
At 7:30?
At 7:30 is when we would be looking at that. But if we can try and move things around at a little bit faster pace, that would be ideal for everyone, I think.
Center gravel cost here, largest project, Douro-Dummer Road from 4th line to County Road 40. Similar motion to the one I made for the 6th line. I would like to see staff evaluate any sections of that road that are in desperate need of repair versus doing the entire road. $100,000 is a significant portion of the levy. And just want to make sure the clerk got the motion in.
Okay, it's like somebody motioning.
Copy and paste, yes.
Yeah. All right, is there someone who will second that motion?
I will second that motion.
Deputy Mayor Nelson, welcome to the conversation.
You stole my motion out.
That's right, welcome to the conversation. Okay, so we've got a mover and a shaker. And Councillor Watt wants to speak to the motion.
Through you, Madam Mayor? Yeah, I turned back through there because I've got friends that live in the 7th line and stuff like that. And yeah, it's not bad, and I think the discussion has been before. At the far end, the County Road 40 coming west, there's probably a kilometer, so somewhere in that vicinity that has houses. Like, I mean, there's a few along there now compared to what there was none years ago, so like that. If we can just do that portion, you know, and keep them very, very happy, which is just gonna be a small portion, it's probably gonna cut, you know, a number of $1,000s off that gravel budget. And then the department come through and just, you know, if there's a couple spots here and there that they need touch ups, so we got with spot gravel, like you said, I think we could have a big savings there, probably over 1% in our budget.
So I'm just gonna clarify, picking up on Councillor Vervoort's motion, about this spot treating, and you referenced it as well on the County Road 4 to Cooper, the 6th line, sorry, 6th line, my apologies. So you have both talked about doing the spot treatment or taking care of specifics. Is it fair to suggest that your motion prior and this one on the floor right now would allow staff to rejig these numbers? So instead of seeing 96,000 for this particular road, it might come back at $10,000 or something, and then we'll see that again in a draft budget as opposed to just saying,
yes,
strike it and take it out of operating? Is that?
That's very fair.
Reasonable, yes, from a finance standpoint? Okay, and from the seconder on that motion, you're good?
I was going to try and speak to Adam on that. Through you, Madam Mayor.
Perfect, thank you. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so motion on the floor. Councillor Watt spoke. Staff, any concerns, comments, risks, liabilities? Elena?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I was just making sure with our manager of public works that gives him sufficient time to check those roads. So he has nodded yes. Our anticipation is to pass the budget on the 21st, so certainly Paul can make those adjustments. We'll bring it back. I know you spoke to it as a draft. It essentially will be the final draft. If for whatever reason council's not happy, we can certainly come back. But with any hope, we will get it passed on the 21st. So when we come back with the final budget, Paul can identify those areas with regard to those motions.
Thank you for that clarification. Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Jake, maybe you can answer this question too. My question is do we still have a bit of, do you have a bit of emergency money for spot patching? For example, I'll use the two roads that we've said about. Is there a bit of emergency funds there that in the spring that you don't have to come back to council, that you could actually go and fix a few emergency spots? I presume that you have enough. You feel there's probably enough in the budget that would allow you to do that in a short. Sometimes you don't have much time to wait for 2 weeks for a council meeting.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We do have money for gravel resurfacing in our operational budget for those instances where we come into spring issues, I guess it is, and anything that we do see that at other points of the year that we have jotted down to try to alleviate, like you had mentioned earlier. But there is only so much in that budget, so I'm happy to see that we can work on the current numbers and reduce that and still have a bit of money to do these sections you were speaking of, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so motion on the floor. Questions or comments? Can I call the vote? Oh. So it's looking like
Similarly to the project earlier, this has some alternative funding options. So with this project being removed, 96,000 is being funded through gas tax. Again, it's not, we're allowed to apply gas tax to kind of any and all roads projects. So from a simplistic accounting perspective, I typically choose the larger projects to make up that gas tax allocation. So it's not strategic in the sense of applying gas tax specifically to this project, so it can be reallocated.
Okay. Are you asking or are you clarifying?
We will, I guess that would be a question for hope for clarification, that if it is the intent to lower the levy by removing and delaying this project and reapplying gas tax to other projects.
Through Madam Mayor, yes, the intent is to reduce the levy.
Councillor Johnson, you had a question?
Sure. Talking with the gas tax, that's something that we can use, fill in on some of these other items?
Yeah, so we, through your worship, we do have a reserve of gas tax currently. It's kind of my rainy day, and also my, knowing that we have these large reserves. It can be used for the joint facility, it can be used for equipment that's related to roads, and so knowing that we had some of these pressures coming next year, I was not recommending at this point to use the reserves that we have of gas tax, but we do get an annual allocation. We had a top up of gas tax 3 years ago, and that is in a reserve currently. But the 2023 allocation is known, and that has been applied to the budget, and that is what this 96,000 is part of, is our 2023 gas tax allocation.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just quick, the motion was for staff to go back, look at some of these roads, see if it's possible to reduce the costs, and come back with an update. And I think at that point we can discuss a little bit further in terms of gas tax being put to reserves as a rainy day fund, perhaps being used for equipment purchases, or perhaps being used for road surface treatment. So at this point, I request that you call a vote on that motion.
Okay, we've got a motion to call the vote.
Request.
All in favor of cutting Center Dummer Road? That motion carries. Sorry, did you have your hand up? It's like, are you voting? Wave in. All right, moving on. Councillor Vervoort, were you done your list?
I think it kind of ties in with my previous comment that I would I'm not too sure if this is motion, I think it is requesting staff go back and revisit road projects to see if an entire project is required this year, or if kind of more spot treatment would be appropriate on some of these roads.
In general, for all the roads?
For everything.
And is there anybody who will second that? Before I call the vote on that, staff, any comments or questions on the ability just to revisit the existing projects to see if there are other projects that could be simplified, shortened, spot treated as the two prior cases we've discussed?
Through you, Madam Mayor, timing may be a little tight to do that.
Before our next budget meeting, On 21st.
If you want me to go through everything, yeah. As I mentioned before, and Councillor Watt has spoke on it, Council made this decision to put 3 inches of gravel on every 5 to 7 years to help alleviate some of these issues that we're speaking of. I'm not following the schedule every 5 to 7 years. That's where it sits, that's what I do. We are looking at the schedule, moving things around. It's a living document. So just so council knows, we aren't following it. It fell on 5 years, so we're doing it. We look at every road, we extend it if we can. Sometimes we have to do one 2 years earlier, so it moves around.
Thank you for that.
Councilor
Councillor Johnson?
Chair, I must say, Jake, the last few years, I noticed with the graders out more now, I noticed a big difference in some of our roads. And therefore, I do want to thank you for maintaining it and then trying to, because it does mean so much. Like I live on a road that in the past has been undrivable. But lately, the grader comes more often, and believe me, that really pacifies people. I mean, it's still gonna break up spots, but I think that is as much as anything, instead of just throwing gravel on. I think the big thing in my mind is getting those graders out and keep them out. And as you drive around, or whoever's spot checking them, doing that means so much. Be on top of it, and get the graders there. I'm not saying that the gravel is not necessary. You know your business, and it is necessary. But I do think we can, like I say, shift things around and do where we need to do, and then continue on with whatever money we got left to give you to continue on doing your job. I do want to thank you for what you're doing, but I do think we've got to make some big adjustments here.
Thank you for that. So we have a motion on the floor. Can you just remind me what that motion is?
Yep. That staff be requested to revisit all road projects to see what projects can be reduced, simplified, or spot treated to reduce the load.
Okay, and that was moved by Councillor Report, seconded by
Councillor Johnson.
Okay, of course. All in favor? Are you good? Okay. All in favor? That motion fails. All opposed? All right.
Madam Mayor.
Another
question.
Sure.
Or actually, I will shelve this question.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
I think that this could have been a recording vote because I think it's an integral part of the budget. Roads are one of our largest expenditures, and it would be good to have a record of who is in favor of saving ratepayers money on road resurfacing projects versus blanket spending.
Procedurally, you can still ask to
I would like
ask
to,
for a recorded vote.
I would
And
like to ask for a recorded vote.
Madam Clerk?
Well, my last motion.
Can we comment before we do the vote?
No.
No? Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
Just wait for the clerk to.
Dummer Ward Councillor, how do you vote?
In favor.
Douro Ward Councillor, how do you vote?
In favor.
Councillor at Large, how do you vote?
Against?
Deputy Mayor, how do you vote?
Opposed?
Mayor, how do you vote?
Opposed.
Vote fails.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. While we are doing a little bit of housekeeping at 7:24, perhaps a member would be interested in making a motion to extend the hour as we're approaching.
I would make that.
Councilor Watt, Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor? Thank you very much. All right. Deputy Mayor Nelson, apparently.
You're up.
It's just, your colleague pointed at you.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor. I have dealt with one issue that I had on my agenda. I would like to speak a little bit on the library. And I see we have Maggie with us here.
Hello, Maggie on Zoom.
Thank you, Maggie. And Maggie, I hope you don't take this too personally, but I believe at this time, I know we don't really have much to say about the library, how you run your business, but I believe at this time, to increase our staffing hours for this year, especially with so much, this is a very hard budget for all of us sitting on council, and to try and keep with the inflation rates the way they are, and to add more services, I don't think this is a year to actually do that. I'm not saying for a moment that I'm not in support of the library, but I think there's some, to extend the hours and however you just put that together, I don't know how much money that is. Maybe you can answer that, Maggie, or Paul, maybe?
Who wants to take that? So what is the cost of extending the hours proposed currently in the budget?
So,
Through your worship, I don't have that number in front of me. I know Maggie and I have talked about it. And I'm not sure if I provided it to her. I just would maybe need a minute to dig it up.
yeah.
I don't have the exact number that the increase is related to the hours versus wage changes. But we did calculate it at one point, so I would just need to find it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll
So-
second the motion.
Hold on a second, you're getting ahead of me. Wait until you're acknowledged by the chair, please, sir. Okay, so if we can just table that, perhaps, while our treasurer digs up that number. And Maggie, you were trying to talk. Did you have some knowledge to share on that at this point in time?
I was going to say that I don't have the number exactly, but just that in terms of how it's used, like the board, I'm sure, would be happy to meet somewhere in the middle, because anything would help at this point at the rate that the library membership is growing and the rate at which we're providing new programs. It's kind of crazy how quickly growth is being demanded of us. So anywhere you can meet us, I can safely say we would appreciate.
Okay, so if the treasurer, you're still digging up that number, if you don't mind, Deputy Mayor Nelson, if you have another item on your list, we can go down your list and
Sure,
just
if we
table
can,
that for more.
if we can get a little more information on that before we decide something.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he's probably digging that up as we go.
Okay,
So
no
carry on.
problem. And my next item that I would like to speak on is, we've had an ask for the arenas for the future ad hoc committee. And I just want to say, I appreciate all the work that the volunteers have done to date. And I also recognize that something will need to be done to support our community centers, definitely in the future. I do know that there is a lot of money there, upgrades that need to happen and look at in the future. And we do need to spend wisely here on this difficult budget, that's for sure. And I'm also grateful for the investment that, minor hockey has made in the Douro Community Center, new nets, benches, change rooms, water fill stations, all of that stuff in the hockeyville, and all of the dedication and the work that went into that. I would like to move, or ask that we move, that we look at setting maybe 25,000 instead of the ask of 50,000, and set aside maybe $25,000 and let the group continue to do some of the work and follow up with community engagement and basically come back to council with a more definite program on what they want to do and what they want to see. And we could have some money set aside there that we could actually do some studies or something, that if we need to, whatever that might be. if we need a consultant to come in to tell us whether we can put something up against the building or whatever that might be, but bring that back to council so that we can decide what that is and whether, how much money it is also. But if we set aside 25,000, I believe we're kind of moving that project a little bit forward and showing the volunteers that we do appreciate their work and effort, and I think that's important for the community, for sure.
Okay. Hands going up. Councilor Report.
I fully agree with Deputy Mayor Nelson. I see the rationale that by the municipality putting in $25,000 and then requesting community groups that are going to be utilizing the facility to work together so that the township isn't on the hook for the whole thing right away. Let's work together, and instead of spending $25,000 of additional money on a consultant, let's spend the $25,000 on the building in the future versus a consultant today.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, duly
it.
seconded by Councilor Report. I don't know if any staff are here. I'm looking at you, Mike, because I know you're the staff member in recreation that's been liaising with the community, or the committee rather. Any comment on that situation?
To your worship, I know the Douro-Dummer Hockey worked very hard towards securing that grant. As Harold had mentioned, they did award the township $25,000 for building upgrades, a portion of which has already been spent on upgrades in the facilities, and there is still a portion left for future upgrades, which will come to council in the upcoming year. So I do know that in the future, the facilities do need to look at some options. There is currently some grant avenues out there, which we still need to explore. So having anything set aside is, I'm sure the community would be happy with.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilor Johnson. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I thought you were going to talk about, I just wanted to clarify the motion before the vote, please.
Okay. Councilor Johnson.
Mr. Chair, you know something, I'm totally in favor of that 25,000. But saying that, as long as Paul can get everything else down, because this is putting things back up. And some of the things we didn't get earlier have hurt. So as long as it doesn't hurt the bottom line of our tax levy, that's all I can say. But I'm in favor of going to the 25,000. I just hope that it won't bother the bottom line. That's all I can say.
Okay.
25 instead of 50, correct?
That's right.
Yes, that's
Yes.
right, yes. Yeah, the ask was
The ask was 50.
You want clarification of the motion? Okay.
No, it's 10%.
Gentlemen? How about we let the clerk read the motion and we can
Yes.
get on the same track?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I've recorded that the motion is to reduce the ask from the ad hoc committee to 25,000, and that an action plan be presented to council before the release of the funds. Is that adequately capturing the motion?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. Any other comment on the motion? I'll simply say, I mean, as the person who sat on that committee with that group for the last year, so, or not quite a year, I guess, it's, you know, they know that they've got work to do in terms of doing the community engagement and fully expect to come back to council, had expected to come back to council. So I know, I appreciate the work that they've done, as does council, so I think that this is a step in the right direction. Councilor Johnson.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to say, we're not going to deal with that now, but I would like to say in the future, I wouldn't mind sitting on that group, with that group. I've been involved in other studies that we've done with the community and the community centers. And I think I would really, as a special person of council, to sit on that group.
Noted.
Down the road.
Okay, thank you for that. All in favor? That motion carries. Paul,
With that one, it's 10%.
how are you on that library conversation before we entertain another one?
Okay. To your worship. Sorry, my Excel model is rather large and it takes a second just to do a single calculation.
I understand.
And so I have made a calculation. I kind of hate doing these on the fly, so I do want to confirm this before the next meeting. But I do calculate that the change in hours is equating to 17,000.
Thank you for that. So.
And that's wages and all related costs. So, anything to do with CPP, everything, that's the change in the budget, keeping the hours at the rate that they were last year.
Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So Paul, there would be a small change in wages for to keep up with. So it maybe not, it might be closer to 10,000 than maybe like for, so like just keep the status quo. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, so the change to go from what is currently in the budget, which includes additional hours,
right,
to the number of hours that were in the budget last year, will reduce the budget by 17,000.
And just to further clarify, the overall increase, I think, that we're seeing in the operating budget for this particular wages and benefits line was 31,000. So the difference, that $17,000 is what's coming out for the increase in hours. The difference would be any contractual staffing obligations. Is that correct?
Correct. There's also just an accounting change. Previously, the cleaning services were being recorded in contract services. Really, it's an employee, and I'm capturing it correctly from an accounting perspective under wages. And so, that's more of a shift, right, from one line to another. And then the other big change for library, and it's captured kind of in my overall summary that I did in terms of the changes, is OMERS for part-time staff, which was not in the budget last year, but is now part of needs to be included and offered to part-time employees.
Thank you for that clarification, Paul. So, Deputy Mayor, you were going down a path. I'll come back to you on that now that we have that information.
Well, I'd so move that we don't increase the services for this year. And we look at it again next year, and hopefully next year will be more favorable to do something with the library there.
Okay, so as we can't.
Sorry, I know we
tell
can't
them
commit
to do
ourselves.
that,
Right.
but we have to give them.
Right.
Would be what you would
Yes.
need to do?
Yes, that's right.
So what's your motion, sir?
My motion is to stay at the status quo for hours, or, round, for the dollar figure.
So
Stay at the status quo for the dollar.
So reduce their operating budget by $17,000 to be confirmed by the treasurer?
Yes, we'll let Paul confirm.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Does that make sense on your end? Okay. Is there someone who will second that motion?
All the motion has been there, I will second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor Watt?
And we've had one library board meeting. We actually last night had an orientation meeting for 2 hours online, stuff like that. And Maggie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the staffing, the patrons has increased 45% over the last while. It was a significant number that we discussed last night.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, that's correct. So about almost half of our membership is new. We're averaging about between 10 and 25 new members a month. The wage increase is really about increasing staff's capacity to deliver what's already being demanded of us. Growth like the strategic leadership that the CEO has to give in order for the organization to respond to what the community is asking for can't happen on 25 hours a week. And if it does, then, or if that's what it says at, then even a little bit more so that we can allow our library assistant or a programming and outreach staff member to really deliver those services, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And in saying that, the lady in the presentation last night, she said we're probably in this area, and for sizes of towns around Ontario, we're probably at the low end of hours that we actually put in. So the general feel of the committee last night was to definitely increase. Now, whether, and like Maggie said, maybe it doesn't have to be all at once, but even if we can do a portion this year and a portion next year, kind of like that, I'd certainly be happy with that. There's a lot of work that will be done, you know, with the upgrade of, and the number of people that use it, and programs that are on the books but need to be implemented. So that's just my comments on it. I'd like to see something, whether, you know, it's, but that's just my comment. I mean, it's just, yeah, thank you.
That's entirely fair. Deputy Nelson?
Can I rephrase my motion? I'd like to rephrase my motion to lowering the amount of money by $10,000.
Okay.
$10,000, that will still give you an increase to maybe deal with the oncoming more people, and hopefully that's enough.
Okay, and Councillor Johnston, I believe you had seconded that. Are you still okay with that as the, no? So we have a motion on the floor to reduce the budget by 17,000?
The original.
Yeah, we vote on the original and then we vote on the amendment. The amendment first is, right. Original. I'm so glad I have two clerks beside me. You guys are struggling with it, because it's like a second. Not agreed, so I'm struggling. There we go. Yeah, okay. So we are doing what? We are voting on the amendment? No, we're voting on the original motion.
On the original motion. There's no amendment.
The amendment doesn't exist.
Okay, so we're voting on the original motion to reduce the budget by 17,000? All right, and that's the operating budget for library, just to be clear. Yeah, okay. First, seconded, all in favor? That motion carries. All opposed? There we have it.
Never had a second and what go on.
Where were we? Do you have more now, Deputy Mayor? Refresh, shake off the cobwebs, you know?
I believe I'm at the end of my list.
All right, terrific. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, through Madam Mayor. Couple things right off the start. The back dam shelter roof and the Clintonia Park shelter. I think we could probably defer them for another year or two. And I know we had community engagement before, especially in Clintonia Park, from residents and even from a couple of building suppliers there that could possibly help us with coming up with materials and workers and so on and so forth. But we could maybe get these done for next to nothing or nothing down the road, something like that. And it's something we could certainly give us some time to look into. But I would make a motion to defer both of those, remove them from the budget for this year.
So we're talking Clintonia Park
and the
back dam park. Okay. Is there someone who will second that? Councillor Verfort? Mike, I'll throw it over to you to comment. Mr.
Your
Minzer?
Worship, I do know that the back dam is starting to deteriorate pretty good. And the wood is falling apart around the edges. It starts to become a safety concern. And with the weather patterns lately, and ever changing, we want to make sure that we have something secure in place for people to seek shelter. But at the same time, we can look at putting that off and looking at alternate funding for the following year. I do know the idea behind the Clintonia Park was, yes, there was a committee in place, and yes, there was talks about having the community engagement and fundraising. My thought behind the budget at the time is to look for what the full cost is, because didn't know at the time what the actual fundraising efforts would bring in. It was my intention to reach out with that committee and residents to organize something, but at the time, again, you don't know what efforts they're going to raise unless we set a target number that they had to reach. So we could look at that as another option to put a target that we spend up to a maximum of this. We can look at other opportunities with builders. Maybe they want to donate too, but I feel that we should have something in place if we're going to do that, for looking for donations to possibly purchase materials.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to ask a quick follow-up question. It's interesting to me how they're both being coupled because of their good comparisons to one another. I recall with the Clintonia Park shelter that was removed, it was in quite a state, shall we say, with a significant lien and what have you. How does that particular one compare to the safety concerns that you're voicing against the back dam shelter?
Your worship, I'd say the roof integrity is comparable, but I guess the supports underneath it, the one in Clintonia was in a lot worse shape. I think we have a good foundation to build off at back dam. It's just a lot of the shingles now are curling, deteriorating, and some portions of underneath the shingles, which is the plywood, is starting to rot, and the fascia boards are starting to rot off as well. So it's just trying to keep up on the maintenance right now before we get into further costs down the road of our support system no longer being any good.
I understand, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that from council? Councillor Johnson?
Chair there. Mike, do we have anybody that's kind of handy that works for us? That's handy to put up some boards or even shingling? Like in-house I'm talking about. I guess maybe not in your department, eh?
Your worship, I'm pretty sure we all have people in our department that are weekend warriors, but it kind of brings in another concern of, like, at that time, given the height, when all the staff would need all rest, all the safety gear to do all that. There's all those other options. As for being able to do that, I think we could, but at the same time, then we got all those other additional.
But I do know example of the fire department. Like they went out of the way and they did an awful lot of work themselves. And I want to thank them for what they've done. But I mean, they have some staff on that are handy at that kind of stuff, and that's great. But I mean, to prolong it, to keep it going and be safe. I mean, if we could do something, I don't think we're just saying throw it away. But if we could do something to maintain those items of safety and if you're a little handy and buy some wood or whatever be and make it suitable for another year. You know, that's what I'm thinking you could do. Maybe get the fire department out there.
And I think to Mike's point, I mean, we have to be careful about job descriptions and duties as otherwise assigned and what people are trained on and all that kind of stuff. But and certainly the volunteer firefighters are putting on a different hat when they're doing those projects in the community. But I think Mike's hearing loud and clear the maintenance considerations. Councillor Watt?
Yes, if I could, let's look at the secretary. I'd like to amend my motion after hearing what I've heard from our recreation manager, that we defer the Clintonia Park one and go after what we said, see if there's any community engagement, so on and so forth. But the back dam one, that we do redo the roof because it sounds like it's in very bad need of repair and safety wise, and see if we can come up with some cost savings to whether it be donations or someone that will maybe do it for free for service. It never hurts to ask, but keep that one on the box.
Who seconded that? Councillor Report?
I'm on side with that.
You're on side with that? So we're good on this one. Okay, any more discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, next, hopefully a quickie one, please, through you, Madam Mayor. Library flooring. I know we're going to do the drywall and the painting and stuff like that. That's construction work, and it's dirty, it's messy, stuff like that. And I'd like to get that all out of the way, and then maybe do the floor next year. Just a very, it's not a big amount, but I mean, you can start dragging things in or equipment in or anything else that they're gonna have to do stuff like that. They certainly don't want to see a new floor marked up. And it's probably gonna be done at the end, but you never know. It's all time frame on who's going to do it. So I would like to see that one just pushed off till next year, just the flooring itself at the library.
Okay, is there someone who will second that? Councillor Vervoort? Conversation around the library flooring from our treasurer or CEO librarian Maggie, who will pop back on screen. Hello.
Through your worship, only comment is it's currently being funded through reserves.
So it's not gonna make a difference to.
So,
Councillor Vervoort?
to you, Madam Mayor, it's coming from reserves, and I realize that doesn't impact the levy, but I think as we look forward to the future, whether it's 3, 5 years from now, if we're looking at doing a major capital project like the arena project, having that as a full community center could actually involve the library being under the same roof. I think if we look big picture, maybe it's a twin pad arena with full community center, including the library. Maybe there's some retail space that we can rent out as well. Some of these reserve funds could be directed towards that project instead of spending all of our reserves on an existing facility that we may mothball down the road.
Any other questions or comments from council? Deputy Mayor Nelson?
I guess my comment is we have to maintain it, and make it look nice for the public and keep it looking in reasonable condition. If it's coming out of reserve, I really don't have an issue with it. As far as fixing it up and making it look presentable. That's my comment.
All right, we've got a motion on the floor. That's been made and seconded. We'll call the vote. All in favor? Oh, you want to hear the motion?
That the flooring at the library be deferred until 2024.
So we'll call the vote. All in favor? And that motion carries. All opposed? There you go.
Okay, garage door replacement, I believe that's at one of the community centers. Is it a big overhead door type thing, whatever? Mike?
Through your worship, yes, it's the Olympian Room bay door. Just in the last couple of years, we've had to do some, have some service calls essentially on it. We've replaced one of the section panels, and our latest one was to, another panel was falling apart. So it had been refixed or fastened to, and then some of the actual door rollers had come off and brackets broke, so we got that replaced. So essentially it's a ticking time bomb, but you know, it's something that can be deferred, no problem. Just I don't know what service calls we may have going forward, but we can definitely defer something like that.
Yeah. All right, thank you. And by the sound of all the repairs and bits and pieces and stuff we've been doing already, and the brackets are breaking, stuff like that, it's getting near life expectancy. So, and is that the door that comes out onto the ice surface, or the one that goes outside?
Outside.
So, yeah, I'm going to table that one. I'm not going to. That one's again a safety thing. My next one would be to Chuck, if I could, please. Station 1 building review and design. Where, it's 10,000 bucks, I think it is, whatever, but is that something we need to, like, do we need to design now? I'm not quite sure what the design is, because, you know, we all know you do drawings in a year that's obsolete and like that, so it's like, I'm just kind of curious as to is there something we could shave off, or that whole 10, does it have to be done this year? Where are we sitting on that one?
Sure, through you, Chair. So the plan was, as you know, we've talked historically about fire trucks. We're shuffling trucks around because we have to have these pumpers for 20 years. So trucks aren't fitting into stations, and you know we're working on some of the stations that we are. That's a station that doesn't accommodate. We have to move a shorter truck that was at Station 2 to Station 1 to make sure that we could fit the new tanker in to Station 1. So these are the challenges that we have, and we have the truck that was there that's currently at Station 2 is due to be replaced in 2024 as its 20-year life. So just trying to get ahead of, you know, the time it's gonna take to plan these things out and make sure that we can accommodate the truck. If we're gonna, you know, make adjustments to a fire station, we don't wanna have the wrong truck and live with it for 17 years of being wrong because we didn't, you know, get ahead of where we need to go with any adjustments in the building. So that's kind of why it was there. Kind of thought it was gonna fit in with our master fire plan to see what the assessments are. But realistically with, you know, the budget kind of ticking along here, we normally, you know, it's a change in council year too. So, I mean, I can see, you know, maybe deferring that and getting a good start on it earlier in the next year, because usually our budgets are passed by this point. And then we'll have, by the time we get the service master fire plan done, the service delivery review done, it is something that we could consider, because it's probably only going to delay us maybe 6 months by the time we actually get to the work. But that's why it was put in there, and that was for that reason. But by the time we put an RFP out for the master fire plan and get the feedback done and get it all back, and by the time we can get to that, we're probably narrowing that to 6 months. So if that's something that you want to table, we could work with that. But that's the reason why it was in the budget, because we do need to address the issues at the station for trucks that are coming in the near future.
And I appreciate that, so thank you very much for that, and that's what this is all about. We're trying to come up with ideas of, you know, things that we can prolong that are, you know, make us bite the bullet later on, I make that, but, you know, things that we can work with, stuff like that. So if you feel that we can defer that off for the time being, whatever, I'd certainly make a motion to do that.
Okay, the motion is on the floor, seconded by Councillor Report. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? That motion carries. Don't put your hands away yet, folks. We've got some housekeeping to do.
Do we?
So we have reached that time limit where we need to have a frank conversation about our procedural bylaw. We are required to we have two options. We can adjourn the meeting and ask staff to bring us together again for a special meeting, because our procedural bylaw says we can only extend the hour for 30 minutes, which we've done. Or with a 3/4 vote, is that the right number?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how that maps out with 5 people.
We would need 4 people.
Okay, with 4 of us in favor, we can suspend the rules and will allow us to extend beyond 8 o'clock. And if we do that, I would also ask that we take a 5-minute recess to stretch our legs and grab a glass of water or what have you.
Require a motion.
Well, in either case, so who is making what
I'm going to
motion?
make a motion that we request staff set up a special meeting, because I think we've got a couple more hours ahead of us, just with the amount of dialogue that we have specifically related to the budget, which is good. We need to have that discussion, and I think having a special meeting will help.
Is anyone interested in seconding that?
I'll second that,
motion?
because I can hear some cows mooing.
Some cows moving.
Yeah, we don't know what I'm talking about.
I get it. Councillor Watt?
Speak the motion, please, through you, Madam Mayor. It was brought up earlier, and I do see your point. I mean, you know, we've got a bit ahead of us, stuff like that. I don't know how much we have ahead of us, but we do have some ahead of us. But the time frame thing, I mean, we're getting closer and closer to that time that we want to pass this budget. Staff have already told us in another instance, you know, that, you know, we made a comment, but there's not time to do it, kind of like that, you know, to go over things. So I'm kind of of the mind to let's get it done tonight and be done with it, but that's just my comment.
Your point. Any other comments on the motion?
Madam Mayor, my intent is that ideally we could have something within the next week. I'm not too sure what staff are able to put together, but just a comment from.
Apparently we can do it on Friday.
Perfect.
Not according to Paul.
Your Worship, this is more of an FYI. I don't know if people have target numbers in their head. This is rough because there are some numbers we have to review. So I wouldn't want to commit to this number, but it should be pretty close. We are at 5.35
based on our discussions tonight. Thank you for interjecting that. Is Friday good for you though, Paul? He's not even answering. Okay, so.
There's a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor. Let's call the vote. All in favor? That motion carries. Councillor Watt?
Does staff want to just get back to us this week with, you know, in the next day or two, or do you kind of have a time now that you're maybe looking at it, morning, afternoon, evening?
Friday.
10 a.m. Friday.
10 a.m. Friday.
That works for me.
If I can make one request, Madam Mayor, if you have questions and you know you have them, assuming you were prepared tonight, please send them in to us, because I already know we won't have all staff here. So give me the opportunity to then have those conversations in advance so I can answer those questions, or Paul can answer those questions for you. It's always great to have the actual manager here, but if we know ahead of time, we'll do our due diligence to make sure that we have all those answers for you.
Thank you for that, Alana. Okay, so procedurally, where do we go from here? We are now moving to adjourn because it's 8 o'clock.
We have no choice.
We have no choice, folks, and I'm assuming the rest of these items, including budget, will also be on the agenda?
Everything that we have not been able to address today, including the leftovers of the budget, will all be moved to Friday's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. A motion to adjourn?
Just a question about this.
About this.
And it's just a procedural thing again. Do we have to do a confirming for what we've done so far?
We were just saying we should do that.
Okay, so gentlemen, we're on a timer. Let's
I will do that.
Moved, seconded by Deputy Mayor
This is
Nelson.
a confirming for what we've done so far, okay?
All in favor? That carries. And now a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Nelson, Councilor Report, all in favor, and that too carries. Thank you very much. We'll see you Friday at 10.
I didn't know, I was just.
Nice.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, another one.
And then he's going.
Made out, they must have.